Hey everyone, hope you're all doing great. Welcome back to the Anime Fictions 2.0. Today, we're diving into part 5 of What If Naruto's isolation made him a cold, strategic ninja. If you're enjoying these alternate timelines, make sure to hit that subscribe button, share it with your friends, and check out the other videos on the channel. And of course, drop your thoughts in the comments. I always love hearing your ideas. Alright, enough talk, let's get into the story. Chapter 44 Silhouette. The sun had set, and the night was deep. A flock of birds circled the skies, their wings cutting through the air in serene silence, a sharp contrast to the current events unfolding on the ground far below. Alarms sounded from the hidden leaf, echoing through the trees outside its walls. Packs of Niken sniffed the forest floor, leading mass ANBU in every direction away from the village. A distance away, a lone blonde woman hurtled through a dark, grassy plain, leaving behind a trail of flickering blue flames that erased her footprints. Further north, the hidden cloud had fallen silent. Its infamous clouds had retreated from the mountain range, and the smell of decay had begun to envelope the once renowned village. To the far west, smoke rose from the turrets encircling the hidden rock. Dark-eyed golems towered above its walls, and drums beat steadily as every citizen, from child to elder, gathered in the village center to listen to their leader. Southwards, a team of Sannin led by a hooded puppeteer raced urgently through the moonlit dunes of their home. Finally, to the east, in a cave hidden by fog, a number of shadowy figures surrounded a mutilated body, drawing out the last of the chakra contained within. All this, the birds witnessed from above. As a low-hanging cloud passed by, the flock simultaneously tipped to the side, revealing a multitude of glowing, ringed eyes. Then, with another flap of their wings, the night swallowed them. Thanks to Naruto's clones distracting the Hidden Leaf's hunting parties, they had put enough distance between themselves and the village that they had stopped for a break. Gaara had yet to emerge from his unconscious state, and Karen was asleep, presumably exhausted from the prolonged use of her chains. Awash in the moonlight, Naruto sat wide awake, though he was far from being alone. The forest was alive with the shuffling and scuttling of creatures carrying about their nightly routine. A large spider web spanned a tree a stone's throw away from where Naruto sat, its strands illuminated one moment before fading into darkness the next. An insect had gotten itself stuck on the web. As it squirmed, a bulbous black spider suddenly shot out and rolled it up into a knot. Naruto closed his eyes, and the world faded around him, leaving him sitting in a pitch-black space. However, here, too, he was not alone. A multitude of faces surrounded him, silent and pale. They were there because each one of them had unwittingly left a piece of themselves within him. It must have been because it was all in his mind, but for once, the words he really meant to say spilled easily from his lips. Iruka-sensei, he greeted the first one, a chunin with a scar running across his face. I never had the chance to thank you for what you did. After the invasion of the Hidden Leaf, Naruto had seen Iruka's name on the list of the deceased. The name had brought with it a flash of nostalgia. When Naruto had been struggling to improve in the academy, Iruka had discreetly directed him to the archive library, though at the time, he hadn't realized the man's intent. You've abandoned the village, Iruka's voice rang hollowly in the darkness. Where will you go now? Somewhere I can rally my defenses. Right now, his first priority was in leaving behind Fire Country and securing a position away from his pursuers. Next to Iruka, stood a dark-skinned girl with spiky hair that Naruto recognized immediately. The Jinchuriki from the Hidden Waterfall, for one of the many killed by Akatsuki. Naruto had heard she had been taken on her way back from the Chunin exams. You didn't deserve what happened to you, he said. I wish I could have saved you. Her orange eyes arched mockingly. What can you do? I have the 9 tails. I can make a difference. Besides, Fu, a thin, freckled woman stared at him. Her name was Kane, and she had once hired Naruto and his team for their fateful mission in Wave Country. The last he had heard of her was that she had succumbed to the wounds inflicted on her during the interrogation. My team died because of you, said Naruto. But I understand you believed your actions would bring peace. Is it even possible? She whispered. Can this cycle be ended? I don't know. But I have to try. Standing a ways back, an older woman with strands of white mixed in with her brown hair looked off into the darkness. Her expression was stern and guarded, her hands folded neatly on her lap. Even though Naruto hadn't seen her since he was a young child, He recognized her immediately. To the woman who had once been his caretaker, the woman who had been his teammate's mother, he said, "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you or Mayu. I'm going to do what I can from now on to make sure something like that doesn't happen again." With her body still angled away from Naruto, the dark pupils of his ex-caretaker's eyes slowly shifted back until they met his own. "Then first, you must decide. Who is your enemy?" Naruto opened his eyes. The cloud shifted, and a ray of light fell across the spider web. The spider scuttled away, retreating into the shadows, and the light extended to Naruto's face. On the other side of their camp, Karen stirred and opened her eyes. Pushing herself up on her hands, she put her glasses back on and turned to him. "Naruto? Is something wrong?" "No, I wouldn't say that." Karen fidgeted under his gaze, a faint blush tinting her cheeks. "Then why are you staring? Who is your enemy?" "I wanted to ask you. Why did you take my hand?" A look of surprise lifting her chin, Karen blinked rapidly. "Because you held your hand out to me, I guess. Why do you ask? Who is your enemy?" "What if I were to tell you that by following me, we were almost guaranteed to be killed?" Karen's blush faded from her face, and after a moment, she sat up straight. "Not if I can do something about it." Naruto looked down. "You may not be able to. I'm missing in now. So not only do we have to worry about Akatsuki, but bounty hunters from my village will be trying to chase us down." He paused. "If you're having second thoughts, I won't stop you from leaving." A beat passed, and for a moment, Naruto felt his breath catch in his throat. Then Karen replied, "No, I made my decision as well, Naruto, to be on your side. Your enemies are my enemies now." This time, it was Naruto's turn to blink. Looking back up, he saw that even in the moonlight, Karen's hair was a fiery red. Her expression blazed equally fiercely back at him, and he thought if they really were both Uzumaki, they were quite different. Yet somehow, they were both here in this place, at this very moment. Naruto felt the corners of his lips tug back in a smile, a motion that brought with it a lulling sense of warmth. And just a little bit of sadness. Karen's life had not been kind to her, he thought, to have led her to him. "Thank you," he said. It was cold. Snow drifted down from the sky, covering the bridge in white and melting away where it touched his bare skin. A cold wind brushed against him. He shivered, but he had nowhere to go. He was all alone. The snow continued to drift by. Slowly. Serenely. Suddenly, a dark shadow fell on him, and he looked up. There was a tall man there, a ninja. Bandages covered most of his face, leaving just a pair of dark eyes. At the sight, he immediately clambered to his feet, reaching for the man. "I did it," he said, his voice high and childlike. "I killed Kakashi of the Sharingan. I finally avenged you." But the dark eyes only stared down at him in cold ambivalence. "Who the hell are you?" The words were a slap to his face, and he froze. Suddenly, he saw his raised hand. The one good hand he had left there was something dark red on it. It was blood, he realized, and it was spreading. He watched in horror as it rapidly surged from his fingertips, to his wrist, to his arm, his shoulder, then it was in his neck, and suddenly he couldn't breathe anymore. It was strangling him, suffocating him, and the entire world was beginning to turn red. Haku's eyes flew open and he sat up, a silent scream splitting his lips. His heart was pounding in its ribcage, his skin cold with sweat. He looked around at his surroundings wildly, searching, but the world was no longer red. It was not snowing either. It was dark, and the air was heavy with humidity. "Haku?" A high voice cut in. "Are you okay?" Letting out a rattling exhale, Haku closed his eyes, clearing his thoughts and collecting himself. "Yes, I'm all right." Since leaving the Hidden Leaf with their mysterious new ally, they had taken a roundabout route in order to throw off any possible pursuers. So far, however, they had been left alone. Her gaze still searching him suspiciously, his teammate Ajisai frowned. "If you say so." At the sight of her face, Haku felt his stomach twist guiltily. She had declined Kabuto's offer to heal her broken nose with medical ninjutsu, and the swelling was only now starting to go down. Speaking of which, Haku and Ajisai seemed to be the only ones around. "Where did Kabuto go?" He said he was going to scout the area. Something about searching for the hidden pathway. Haku raised an eyebrow. A hidden pathway? Can we really trust him? Who's to say he isn't just leading us into a trap? For some reason, Ajisai seemed perturbed by his words, her eyes flickering uneasily away from him. If he was going to do that, he would have done it while we were still in enemy territory. I hope you're right. Ajisai hesitated and then said quietly, if only Swearin was here, we'd know for sure. Suddenly, she grew very still. He's coming back. Ajisai had discreetly placed a tracker on their mysterious guide near the beginning of their journey, and they had been careful to talk only when Kabuto was outside of hearing range. The bushes in front of them parted, and Kabuto strode into the clearing. As Ajisai surged forward to address him, Haku hung back. Now that he'd regained some semblance of control over himself, it felt strange being there. He'd never thought about what he would do after he had gotten his revenge for Zabuza. Ever since that red-headed leaf Nin had spared him in Wave Country, Haku had considered himself a dead man living on borrowed time. When the man with the snake had marked him, he thought his luck had finally run out. And yet, against all odds, he was still here, a mercenary from the Hidden Mist, masquerading as an agent of the Hidden Rain. A guide's going to be meeting us, said Kabuto. They'll be taking us the rest of the way to meet your leaders. Ajisai's eyes lit up. Lady Angel? As his teammate's frame visibly loosened up, to his surprise, a sense of relief also washed through Haku, followed shortly by a stab of revulsion. It seemed his years of pretending to be an Nin hadn't quite left him untouched by the Akatsuki's brainwashing. Still, Zabuza had once worked for Akatsuki before meeting his demise. Haku raised a hand to his covered shoulder. At some point since they had left the village, the seal on his body had almost completely disappeared. The little he knew about Fuinjutsu told him that it was possible that the man who'd put the seal on him had died. Likely, he had been killed in the raging battle at the Hidden Leaf. But somehow, Haku didn't think that was quite the case, as he could still feel a tiny presence on his shoulder. Though much smaller than it had been, it was still there, darkly pulsating. What could it mean? Sasuke's team was in shambles. There was really no better word to describe it. Immediately following Naruto's escape, they'd all been brought into the intelligence division for intense questioning. While it soon became clear that they didn't know anything, the situation worsened when Kakashi refused to have his memory probed. He was taken away, and the remainder of their team was immediately put on house arrest with their ranks suspended. 15 hours had passed since then without their receiving word from anyone on the outside, and Sasuke was about to explode. Meanwhile, the entire situation had left Sakura already on the verge of a breakdown since the news of Ino's death, curled up on the ground in the fetal position, mumbling nonsensically to herself. Even Minma, usually a ball of energy and source of non-stop mindless chatter, hadn't spoken a word since their house arrest, though that may have been because at some point in the investigation, he'd gotten his mouth duct-taped shut. As for Sasuke, he didn't know what to think. Naruto, killing a dozen Leaf agents? Well, that he could believe. Or at the very least, he believed Naruto was fully capable of having done it. But more importantly, Kakashi, his sensei, an accomplice? That was impossible, and he would swear it on his clan's crest if it came to it. Unfortunately, nobody cared what a mere Chunin thought, and once again, Sasuke felt frustration roiling in the pit of his stomach. Thud. Thud. His eyes furious and wet above the duct tape, Menma appeared to have turned the entire wall by the door into his personal punching bag. And as pointless as it was, Sasuke was on the verge of joining him when the door suddenly opened and a masked ANBU stepped in. Uchiha Sasuke? He lowered his fist. That's me. The Hokage wishes to talk to you. The ANBU looked pointedly around the room at his teammates. Just you. As they traveled south, the forest land gave way to an expanse of salt flats that reflected the night sky. Looking down at what appeared to be stars glimmering under her feet, Karen felt her breath catch. She'd never seen such a beautiful sight before. Looking coyly over at Naruto, she felt her cheeks heating up. Somehow, in the span of a few weeks, she had gone from having fat, ugly grass Nin draining her chakra to accompanying her crush under a starry night sky. How romantic, she thought. She was so lucky. Suddenly, something at her back stirred, rudely dragging her out of her fantasies. Gaara. Holding back a sigh, she warned Naruto, "He's waking up." Her chakra chains had been holding Gaara midair throughout their journey. The two of them came to an abrupt stop, sloshing the water at their feet. Through the entangled chains, Gaara's dark-rimmed eyes were already wide open, regarding them in clouded confusion. "Where am I?" He struggled briefly to no avail. "Where are you taking me?" "Gaara," Naruto began calmly. "You were losing control in the cell, and I decided to bring you with." "I told you," Gaara snarled. "If you don't leave me alone, I'll kill you." Annoyed, Karen sniffed. "I'd like to see you try." Her chains tightened around Gaara, who let out a low growl. "Karen," said Naruto. With a sigh, she loosened her chains by a fraction. Gaara immediately jerked forward, but the chains remained bound around his form. Realization dawned upon his face, his back arched, his face contorted, lips drawing back to reveal his teeth, and Gaara let out a scream. It was angry and hateful, but nothing like the screams Karen had heard back in the Leaf Village. With her chains sealing away Gaara's tailed beast, the scream was solely human, and it soon petered away into nothing. Finally, facing the night sky, Gaara muttered in a dark voice, "I'm going to kill you. I have to. I have to." Frowning, she turned to Naruto. "He's not going to come around, you know. Words have no effect on him." Suddenly, Naruto walked past her. Before she could cry out in warning, he'd raised a hand and gripped one of the chains binding Gaara. "You're a Jinchuriki. The Akatsuki will be coming after you soon. You have two choices. You can choose to stay with us, and pray to survive another day. Or you can choose to leave, and die when they extract your tailed beast from you. The decision is up to you." Karen swallowed. She could feel the chakra in the chains straining under the force that Naruto was exerting. "I choose to kill you," Gaara spat. "I choose to listen to your screams as I rip you apart." Naruto paused and then released the chain. "Karen, let him go." "Are you sure?" "He's out of immediate danger here. And I need your sensory abilities more than I need him." Despite the rising gravity of the situation, Karen flushed with pleasure. It was true that when her chains were activated, she was unable to use her mind's eye to sense anything. She shot a look back at Gaara, though his body was relaxed. Judging from the murderous look in his eyes, she wouldn't have been surprised if he made good on his promise the instant he was freed. Letting him go here was akin to releasing a rabid animal into the open. Still, Naruto was there with her. Closing her eyes, Karen traced the outline of her chakra that connected her to Gaara. Though she wasn't exactly sure why it had taken the form of chains, somehow, it felt the most natural to her. She called it back now, and with a clinking sound, it began to unfurl itself. When the chains had completely disappeared back into Karen, her senses returned, and she found herself once again surrounded by two monstrous chakra signatures. Shivering, she opened her eyes only to realize that somehow, Gaara had disappeared. In his place, a rising wall of sand glistened in the moonlight. There was no time to run, it was already surging towards them. Karen felt her eyes begin to widen, her body frozen in place, her mind replaying the scene of the genin in the Chunin exams that had died from sand exploding through his body, and she thought, "This is it." What followed next happened in the blink of an eye. One moment, Naruto was standing next to Karen. The next, there was something that could only be described as an explosion. Unbearable heat and wind buffeted her face, and the wall of sand crumbled apart. Coughing through the resulting cloud of dust, Karen could make out two figures on the ground. It was Naruto. He had pinned Gaara to the ground, both with a hand to the throat and also with a pressure so suffocating, it stopped the shout in Karen's throat. As the air cleared, his changed features grew more apparent, his red hair fell to his shoulders, and the whisker marks on his face had grown pronounced, giving him a more feral appearance. Naruto's voice, however, was steely calm. "You won't hurt her. I won't let you." Seemingly unable to move, Gaara's eyes bulged in anger. "Why? We're both Jinchuriki. We have the same eyes. So what's the difference between you and me?" "The difference is that I know who my enemy is," said Naruto. Blood trickled down from the corner of Gaara's lip, and he let out a maniacal laugh. "Anyone who isn't me is my enemy. The whole damn world is my enemy." "Was your sister your enemy too?" Gaara's laugh cut off sharply. His eyes narrowed. "Shut up. Shut up. Naruto ignored him. You did kill her, after all. Shut up. Her name was Temari, wasn't it? She was a good shinobi. She didn't deserve to die that way. She was just trying to stop you. The ground around them began to shake, and Gaara's voice dropped to a cold whisper. Nobody can stop me. Nobody will stop me. And yet here we are. Though nothing changed in Naruto's expression, suddenly impossibly the pressure in the air doubled. The ground fissured with a loud crack, and Karen stumbled, her pulse drumming in her ears. Then without warning, the pressure faded away, gone as quickly as it had arrived. Pulling back, Naruto reached up to his forehead and loosened his eight. For a moment, he gripped it in his hand. Then, he dropped it, letting it land with a splash at his feet. If you ever find yourself in need of an ally, he said, come find us. Gaara didn't respond. Naruto began to move, and Karen followed him, looking back only once to see Gaara's lone figure becoming smaller and smaller in the distance, before disappearing completely. Once the ANBU had delivered Sasuke to the Hokage's office, to his surprise, the agent bowed and backed out of the room. The door slammed resoundingly shut, leaving behind just Sasuke and the man known as Shimura Danzo, who was currently seated behind the desk, wearing the hat that bore his new status as the fifth Hokage. A single dark eye regarded him from a face swathed in bandages. Sasuke wondered passingly whether he had lost his other eye in battle. He didn't know much about the man, only that he had been one of the Third's advisors. The minutes began to tick by in silence. Nonplussed, Sasuke remained still, determined not to give anything away. Suddenly, Danzo spoke. Do you know why you're here? His voice had the low, raspy quality of someone intimate with silence. Sasuke scowled. Where's Kakashi-sensei? Once the intelligence division has determined he knows nothing of the Jinchuriki's escape, he will be allowed to return to his duties. You're torturing him? So long as he doesn't resist the interrogation, such methods will not be necessary. Touch a single hair on his head, said Sasuke, and we'll see how long you stay in this office. Danzo didn't look impressed. Watch your tongue, boy. That mulish pride was once your clan's undoing. I wouldn't be so hasty as to try and follow in your family's footsteps. Sasuke felt the heat rise in his face, and took a step forward. You. I am the fifth Hokage. I will be addressed as such. Though Danzo hadn't raised his voice, Sasuke felt a chill that quickly quashed his temper. It suddenly struck him that while he may have never heard anything of Danzo's skill or accomplishments, all this meant was that he knew absolutely nothing about the other man. And on the battlefield, an ignorant shinobi was as good as dead. Kakashi-sensei would never betray the village Hokage-sama, he gritted out. Nor do I know anything that could possibly help you find Naruto. To his surprise, Danzo replied, I know. I did not call you here to ask you about the Jinchuriki. Then why? While Kakashi Izu was, I should say, famed for his use of the Sharingan, he never did manage to utilize it to its full extent. Danzo paused. It is about time you were properly trained. Taken aback, Sasuke blurted out, trained? By who? But he needn't have asked. Before Danzo even spoke again, he knew the answer. By me, said Danzo, steepling his fingers together. I will be your teacher. A torrent of rain welcomed their entry into Rain Country, and as droplets slid down Haku's bare face, he felt a shiver run down his back. Though they were nowhere near the village, back in the rain, it almost felt as though a pair of eyes was trained on his back. Now back in familiar territory, it quickly became clear that their newfound guide was not going to follow the great river to the hidden rain as they'd expected. When they caught their first glimpse of high-rising mountains in the distance, instead of terrain flattening out to marshland, Ajisai came to a screeching stop. Where are you taking us? She demanded, a hand creeping to her pouch. Are you really our ally? With a look at his teammate, Haku followed suit, drawing needles in a flash. Kabuto turned around, his hands raised. I didn't lie. I'm taking you to your leaders. And where would that be? We're nearby, said Kabuto. The guide is going to meet us to take us the rest of the way. Ajisai's expression grew cool. Well, if you're really not lying, then you won't mind this. Before Kabuto could react, Haku flicked his wrists. The thin needles flew through the air, embedding themselves in Kabuto's chest. A taut string, barely perceptible to the naked eye, connected the needles to Haku. "These needles will tell me whether you're lying or not," he explained. When Kabuto's eyes bulged, he added, "Don't worry, they're thin enough that they won't kill you unless you move around too much." "Now," said Ajisai, drawing closer. "Let's do that again." "That won't be necessary," came a new voice. Alarmed, Haku's head turned just in time to catch something blue flying through the air, a bird, before landing on the shoulder of a girl emerging from the rising fog. Where had she come from? Haku hadn't sensed her at all. While she was dressed in dark Akatsuki robes, she couldn't have been more than Haku's age, if not younger. With her bright orange hair and the series of piercings in her face, he was quite sure he had never seen her before. And yet, something about her features left him feeling deeply unsettled. "What's going on? Who are you?" Haku asked. A pair of ringed eyes turned towards him. "You do not recognize your god?" It was a girl's voice, but at the sound of it, Ajisai let out a loud gasp before immediately lowering herself to her knees. "Lord Pain," she murmured in reverence. In a flash, Haku thought of the stories his mother had once told him when he was young, in particular, the story of a faceless being that stole children's faces and wore them as masks. Though the stories had referred to it as a god, in his nightmares, it had always looked more like that of a demon. The girl beckoned towards them, her pale face devoid of all human emotion. "Follow me, and all will be revealed." Chapter 45, Confrontment. In a rowdy, crowded tavern, somewhere deep in snow country, the hostess warmly regarded her patrons. It was to be another successful night, but that was only to be expected. Her business was well regarded for the sweetness of their drinks and their company, and there was more than enough for her customers to fill their stomachs and hearts for the night. As her gaze traveled fondly from one smiling face to another, she noticed a lone man with a shaggy white mane hunched over a table. Something about him looked familiar. It took her another moment to put the face to the name, and when she did, for a split second, a crack appeared in her pleasant demeanor. If she wasn't wrong, and she rarely was, there should be a lifelong ban on that old pervert, so what was he doing here? One sharp look towards her hired men, and a few minutes later, the hostess watched with satisfaction as the pervert was roughly escorted to the door. He went without protest, to her surprise, but perhaps the cretin was finally starting to see his wrongdoings? His expression even seemed rather distraught and remorseful. If the hostess had been a weaker woman, her heart might have even twinged at the sight of him. But she had not gotten to where she was today by being weak, so she slammed the door shut behind the infamous hermit and thought, "Good riddance." Waves sloshed against his feet as Naruto looked out at the shore. The skies were clear, and beyond the circling seagulls, the horizon seemed endless. It reminded him of a different time, in another part of the world. "This is the ocean?" Karen's voice said wonderingly. "It's my first time seeing it." For a moment, Naruto found himself taken aback by this piece of information before realizing that for a genin, especially one like Karen, her inexperience wasn't all too surprising. Looking back out at the water, he found himself wondering what else she had yet to see. "Somewhere beyond that horizon, there's a hidden village," he said. "The hidden whirlpool." Officially, the village was destroyed in a war, but that didn't mean there was nothing left there. In fact, there was a chance Naruto would be able to learn something there to help him control the Nine Tails. It was all there in the letter Jiraiya left behind for Naruto with the messenger toad. "As you well know, the fourth Hokage entrusted the key to your seal with me, to strengthen or weaken it as needed, when the time came. I have not forgotten that you did not wish to depend on a power that you could not completely control. But now that the time has come, I wonder whether you have found yourself looking towards a goal that you cannot reach on your own. And while it is no longer safe for you in the hidden leaf, a large part of which may be due to my deplorable actions, as I once told you, Naruto, where there is a will, there is always a way." When Jiraiya spoke those words to him before, it was in the context of learning Fuinjutsu, specifically, the place where Jiraiya had studied the esoteric art, the hidden whirlpool. Given that information, it seemed to be the logical location where Jiraiya had hidden the key to Naruto's seal. Of course, going to Whirlpool was a feat easier said than done. It was a widely acknowledged truth that with the destruction of the village in the war, there was virtually no way to access the islands that had once encompassed it. The secret to navigating the whirlpools that were a natural phenomenon of the region was said to have died with its people, and the lack of natural resources had dampened any possible interest in repopulating the area. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique. In a cloud of smoke, 10 of his clones materialized around Naruto, before leaping away into the forest at their backs. They had the instruction of gathering information on the current unfolding situation, in order to report back to Naruto as needed. The location of any nearby settlements, the movements of Akatsuki, the whereabouts of any remaining Jinchuriki, the ongoing hunt for Naruto, now a missing Nin, all this was just the tip of the iceberg. There was so much more he needed to know. But that was nothing new for Naruto. I think my mom used to talk about the hidden whirlpool, Karen suddenly said. She had been wandering the shore, her gaze purposeful and focused. Now, her feet came to a stop, and her shoulders rose up and down with every slow intake of the salty air. She used to say that years ago, before we were in the hidden grass, we originally came from the sea. That the sea protected us from the war. She paused. I guess she was wrong. After the hidden whirlpool was destroyed, most of the survivors moved to the hidden leaf, most, but not all. I wouldn't be surprised if Karen is one of their descendants. Naruto's gaze drew to Karen's bright red hair. A lone seagull squawked in the air above them. Let's go take a look then, he said at last. Even for a place like Rain Country, it was an especially foreboding day. Rain poured down from the dark skies, disappearing into the already drenched earth. Lightning shredded the sky, followed by a deep rumbling. The streets of Amigakure were mostly barren, as its inhabitants closed their shutters in favor of the warmth of their homes. Not so far from their gates, a lone hooded figure stepped along a muddy pathway, accompanied by a trail of faintly flickering blue flames. A pair of dark eyes glared out from under the hood. They belonged to the hidden cloud surviving Jinchuriki, Yujito. Yujito had seen better days, which was saying something, given her history and the harsh training she had undergone in her childhood. But now she was the lethal combination of cold and wet, and ever since she had lost track of her target in the fog, she had been rapidly losing morale. How much time had passed since Killer Bee had been captured? 4 or 5 days? While Yujito didn't want to consider it, she was a trained kunoichi first and foremost, and the decreasing likelihood of her fellow Jinchuriki's survival was something she could no longer deny. Nonetheless, she could not abandon her mission not without evidence that it was a lost cause. That, at the very least, was what Killer Bee deserved. At this point, entering the hidden rain, the enemy's stronghold, would be nothing short of suicide. But the hidden cloud was a village that had considered their allies with a caution that rivaled their regard for their enemies, and she knew there had to be some long-term undercover agents still out in the field. Unfortunately, the issue was that with news of the hidden cloud's demise, it would take some time to re-establish contact with these agents. Some may have called it hubris, for they had never prepared for the possibility of total, utter defeat. Whatever the case, one thing was clear: Yujito had to do something before she drove herself insane. You're fighting a losing battle there, purred the Two-Tails. Ajisai had heard the rumors that their lord had transcended all limitations of mortality, and she had always had faith in such whisperings, of course. But seeing was sometimes more than believing, and as she followed at the heels of this feminine deity that had revealed herself to them, she felt tears come to her eyes. Everything would be okay, she realized. Now that Lord Pain was here, all her worries were meaningless, her concerns made trivial. As such thoughts swam about in Ajisai's head, a short distance away, her teammate Haku continued to survey their surroundings with a keen gaze, in particular, the cloaked girl who was silently leading the way. While her features had struck Haku as oddly familiar, with every passing second, he was growing increasingly certain that he had never met her before. And increasingly uncertain as to whether the girl was even human. Was it true? Was she actually the leader of Akatsuki Pain? Then who was the man that Haku had glimpsed on rare occasions back in the hidden rain? In fact, who was Pain? Haku had heard the rumors of Pain's omnipresence, but was Pain just a shared name for a group of individuals? Somehow, Haku didn't think that was quite right. Suddenly, with a shrill chirp, a blue bird burst through the fog and landed on the girl's shoulder. Again, Haku was struck with a strong sense of déjà vu that he tried to shrug off with little success. The hidden cloud has fallen, said the girl Pain, Haku reminded himself. She turned around, her strange eyes slowly scanning each of their faces. The hidden mist is still picking up their pieces, the hidden rock has run away with its tail between its legs, the hidden sand is a mere shadow of its prior self, and the hidden leaf is on fire. Now, at this crossroads, you have come to us. She paused. But by whose call? Yours, and yours alone, Lord Pain, murmured Ajisai, her head bowed in deference. Pain didn't respond. Instead, she raised a hand, and immediately, the thick fog drew back in a display of absolute obedience. Haku felt his eyes widen as he took in the giant maw of a cave that seemingly appeared out of nowhere before them. He hadn't been able to sense it at all. Undoubtedly, he would have walked straight past it if he had not been shown the way. Without any hesitation, the others began to follow Pain into the dark cave. But as Ajisai's form was swallowed up by the shadows of the cave, Haku felt his right arm suddenly throb. Instinctively, he brought it closer to his body, and his feet faltered. Caught alone before the pitch black that gaped before him, the impenetrable fog at his back, Haku's heart stilled. He had thought that with the death of Kakashi of the Sharingan, the throbbing would cease. That by avenging Zabuza, the phantom pains that woke Haku up in the middle of the night would subside. It seemed that was not the case. A face emerged from the dark, Pain the girl with the horrifyingly familiar face. Her ringed eyes pierced ruthlessly into Haku, and her tone was just as hollow, "You are lost." "Who are you?" asked Haku. "Why do I know you?" She didn't respond, silently regarding Haku instead with an unreadable expression. "What's in this cave? Is this Akatsuki's hideout? What do you want from us?" When no response was forthcoming, Haku stopped. It was clear that he was asking the wrong questions. His right arm throbbed by his side, and he exhaled. "What can you offer me?" Finally, that earned him a smile, a disarming smile. For a lingering moment, Haku thought he could have believed that the girl had once been human. "A world where you are needed," she said in a cold voice that belied her face and her words. A shiver ran down Haku's spine. He knew she was lying. But when she beckoned towards Haku, this time, he didn't hesitate. With the help of Naruto's clones and Karin's sensory ability, they soon discovered a small fishing village along the coastline. It seemed it had once been a busy harbor that bridged Fire Country with its greatest ally, but these days, very few ships took refuge in its docks. Instead, a series of worn-down fishing boats dotted the harbor, bobbing listlessly in the hot summer breeze. The few people outside gazed hungrily at Naruto and Karin as they made their way to the lone structure with smoke rising from its chimney, a local pub. They made no effort to disguise themselves. In a village so small and out of the way, the moment that two strangers had appeared, word of them would have spread through the villagers like wildfire. Standing atop the steps leading to the pub was a child dressed in a threadbare smock, and as they passed by, he stumbled. Naruto's hand whipped out and firmly grabbed the wrist of the child. "Careful," he said, giving a reprimanding squeeze before letting go. As the boy let out an answering yelp and scampered away, Naruto was struck by an odd sense of déjà vu. "Naruto," Karin called, motioning towards the pub. "It's here." There were 4 people that looked up at them the moment they entered, the male bartender, and 3 locals. The one that immediately drew Naruto's attention was the man sitting in the far back corner who'd quickly averted his gaze. Dressed in a working man's garb and cap that almost concealed his bright red hair, his face was worn in a way that hinted at extensive seafaring experience. Even without Karin's confirmation, Naruto knew that this was the chakra signature they had followed to the village, the signature that was far too large to belong to any ordinary civilian. "Can I help you?" said the bartender, his tone guarded but polite. While he seemed to be trying to hide his scrutiny, Naruto could feel his eyes lingering on the tanto strapped to his back. Naruto slid a coin across the counter. "A tonic, please, for the 2 of us." The bartender's gaze sharpened at the sight of the coinage. Quickly palming it, he got to work, and soon, they were both nursing pints with suspiciously strong aromas. While the locals had grown quiet amongst themselves, the man closest to them cleared his throat. "We don't see travelers around here often. Where are you coming from?" "Just a bit further north. My sister and I are looking for job opportunities." "Well, you won't find that around here. All you'll get around here's a bit of fishing. Most of the young people already left a long time ago." I've heard there's growing business further south, piped in the lone woman. With that new bridge they built along the southern coast, and all that increased traffic, business has been booming. Nodding, Naruto replied, yes, so I've heard. But the climate there is a little too warm for my sister, so we've been looking around this area. Immediately, Karen began to fan herself. And when they were alive, our parents used to say our ancestral roots were here. There. Naruto turned his attention to the door. Ancestral roots, you say? There was a disruption in the flow of the air. 2 by Naruto's estimate, there were 3 individuals waiting outside for them. A full squad, then. Given the expertise with which they had disguised their approach, they had to be ninja. It would have escaped his notice if there hadn't been a badly patched break in the window letting in the outside heat. Well, where are our manners? What are your names? Boom. With a deafening cracking sound, the ceiling split open in a ragged reveal of the blue sky. Amidst the sudden rain of splinters, Karen hurled herself on top of the red-headed local in the corner, and after a moment's consideration, Naruto kicked aside a large wooden beam that would have otherwise impaled the bartender. Their faces hidden in the ensuing dust cloud, their attackers swiftly assaulted Naruto in a flurry of deadly swipes. As he dodged, he thought one of his attackers' taijutsu felt oddly familiar. The rhythm and the flow of each movement reminded him of someone he had once sparred very frequently with. Ducking below a kunai blade, Naruto crouched low to the ground and sent out an electrical current through the floor of the building, updating him in a flash. Karen and the civilians were largely unharmed, though one nursed a small injury to their shoulder. It was time to move this elsewhere. With a swift draw of a kunai from his holster, Naruto threw. It sliced through the air, aimed straight for the face of the most mobile attacker. They evaded, nimbly ducking and shooting forward only for Naruto to grab them by their collar and throw them bodily at the door. With another splintering sound, the far wall shattered into pieces. Lee! Shouted one of the attackers. A female voice, and a familiar one at that. As the dust cloud settled, Naruto stepped out into the open and took in the faces of his opponents, who had regrouped around the one he had thrown. A kunoichi with hair rolled up into buns. 2 men, one with a bowl cut, and the other with pale eyes. The 3 all sported 8 with the familiar swirling leaf etched on the metal. So his pursuers from the hidden leaf had finally caught up with them. Naruto was far from surprised, on the contrary, he thought it had taken them long enough to find them. With the loss of 2 Jinchuriki, he would have expected Danzo to exhaust all of his resources in a manhunt. While Naruto knew little of the newly instated Hokage, given the limited information he had gleaned before leaving the village, it seemed the most likely direction of his authority. But the identities of his pursuers was a surprise. Naruto had expected mass Danbyu, not a squad that he had history with, however limited. Please, Naruto, said Tenten, as she helped a bloodied Lee to his feet. It's not too late, turn yourself in. You can still come back to the village. That's funny, Naruto replied, drawing his tanto. Because you 3 were definitely trying to kill me just now. Our mission was to catch you, dead or alive, said Niji. As for my preference, his eyes bulged as he activated his Byakugan, and he held his hands up in a seal, but raising a hand, Tenten blocked him. Rock Lee spat out a glob of blood and wiped his lip. Naruto, how could you kill those people? How could you betray the leaf? I don't understand. Why did you turn on our village? Tenten pleaded. Stand aside, Tenten. I always found it suspicious how his teammates died. He's merely showing his true colors now. At that, Tenten flinched. Her eyes darted searchingly towards Naruto, but he didn't say anything. After a long moment, she lowered her arm in defeat. Then, Naruto called out, Karen. Clang! Brightly glowing chains burst out from the building behind them, circling around the 3-leaf ning. While Niji and Tenten leaped out of the way, Rock Lee was a beat too slow with his injuries, and the chains tightened around him. Quick drawing kunai into her hands, Tenten kicked off as she landed and burst towards Naruto. But he had already predicted Tenten's trajectory, because her way of fighting was familiar to him. This is Tenten, guys. These are my teammates, Mayu and Naruto. He recalled now Tenten had trained alongside his old teammate, growing up. Like Rai had been, she was a weapons specialist, and even now, years later, he could see Rai's taijutsu echoed in some of her movements. But while the similarities would have once given Naruto some pause, he continued to swing his tanto through the air, because he couldn't let it stop him. Not here. Not now. Not when, for the first time in years, he could see so clearly the path laid out before him. That was why he wouldn't apologize for what he was about to do. Who is your enemy? Plunging his tanto into Tenten's shoulder, Naruto slammed her down to the ground. The sound of cracking bone rang out sharply, and Tenten let out an agonized splutter. Behind them, still struggling against Karen's chains, Lee screamed. Niji, to his credit, didn't blink. Hands outstretched, his famed eyes focused, he swung around his teammate and aimed a deadly blow at Naruto. Lightning crackled. One instant, Naruto was sitting atop Tenten, his hand still on the blade. The next, he was behind Niji. He raised a hand, crackling with lightning chakra, to Niji's neck, but just as he chopped down, Niji rolled forward in a quick dodge. Rising to his feet, his chest heaving, Niji directed a hostile glare at Naruto. Things won't go quite as they did the last time we faced each other. Perhaps. Lightning chakra began to surge through Naruto's body. Perhaps not. Yujuto was trailing the border between Fire Country and River Country when she spotted something oddly shaped in the murky distance. If it weren't for the dense fog, she would have seen it earlier, as it stood out starkly amidst the endless plains. As she drew closer, she realized it was an arrangement of different-sized rocks. A flat sheet of rock rested on 4 smaller boulders, with several rocks scattered across its top. It must have been a shrine, or a memorial of some sort. At the thought, an image flashed through her mind. Bright, flickering flames. Crumbling rocks. A charred body, lying on the ground. Yujuto let out a sharp exhale, clearing her head, but despite herself, she could feel her eyes growing hot. She'd stopped through 2 villages now, but she had yet to find any of the Cloud's undercover agents. It was improbable, nay, impossible that she was the sole survivor of the hidden Cloud. And yet, as she traveled through the endless plains of Fire Country, she had never felt so alone. Looking down at the rock shrine, as she remembered everything she had lost, she had a sudden thought. Back in the hidden Cloud, their customary rite of passage for their dead included keeping vigil for 3 days and nights, in order for their spirits to arrive safely in the afterlife. She hadn't had a moment to herself since the bombing of their village, let alone 3 days to spare to mourn her lost comrades. Standing alone in front of that foreign shrine, however, she finally allowed herself a moment to bow her head and utter a prayer. Watch over me, Yujuto said silently. Guide me to my comrades. And I will make our enemies pay. In her mind, she saw Darui's white-haired figure walking away from her. His body was whole and strong, the way she remembered it, and not the charred log that she had last seen. If he had lived, and if the hidden Cloud had not fallen, she thought he could have become Reikage. Very sentimental and all. But are you sure you have the time for this? The Two-Tails said suddenly. Quiet, she hissed back. I'm sensing a large chakra signature nearby. Yujuto's eyes snapped open. She immediately dropped down to her haunches, her fingers sharpening into claws. Reveal yourself. A shadow appeared in the fog. It grew darker and larger as it approached, and then, a young man staggered into view. The first thing Yujuto noticed was the Hittite slung around the band by his waist that told her he was a Sannin. The second thing she took in was the emaciated appearance of his frame. He looked as though he hadn't eaten or drank water in several days. Finally, she looked at his face. Dark, unfocused eyes, and a prominent red tattoo that stood out starkly on his forehead, love. Who are you? Asked Yujuto. While Karen was getting more and more used to handling her chakra chains, its use still required the entirety of her concentration. Which meant that as long as they were out, she couldn't sense anything, and for someone like Karen, she might as well have been blind. Nonetheless, at Naruto's command, as they had previously discussed, she had summoned her chains. Unfortunately, only 1 out of the 3 leaf nin she had detected had been caught in them. Karen could feel him currently struggling to free himself, but it was futile, of course. Her chains had been strong enough to contain a rampaging Jinchuriki, so there was no chance an ordinary ninja could escape. This did mean, however, that Karen was essentially useless in the remaining fight against the other Tonin mission, made only slightly easier by the knowledge that Naruto had already accounted for this. Your chains will keep at least one of them down. But that should be enough for me to take care of the rest. It still gave Karen a thrill to know that Naruto now counted her in his plans, counted on her to be there, by his side. She was already squirming at being unable to see him in her mind's eye, and once she had confirmed that the civilians, especially the red-haired fisherman, were safe, she finally ran back outside. Just before she stepped across what remained of the divider, an intense bright light suddenly flashed in the air, almost searing her eyes, followed shortly by an explosion. Karen managed to look away just in time, but even then, all she could see was throbbing circles of yellow and orange. Shaking her head, her eyes narrowed, Karen staggered outside. The circles faded, and as her vision cleared, the sight she saw there took her breath away. Naruto stood alone in the midst of 3 fallen leaf nin, his entire body surging with lightning, and a ball of wind chakra churning in his hand. Behind him, a bloody Tonto pinned the kunoichi by her shoulder, and the remaining male lay prone on the broken ground, the one with the Byakugan. Had Naruto discharged that bright light to momentarily blind the male? But above all, what caught her attention the most was his expression. Nearly every time she had ever encountered Naruto, his face had always been blank. Whether he'd been facing her in the Chunin exam, or offering her fish in the forest, or even fighting against Gaara, his face had always resembled an emotionless mask. In Karen's opinion, that was even a part of his charm. But his expression now. It was as though a tight lid on a box had finally knocked loose, and while Karen didn't have the exact word to describe what she saw peeking through, she felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. She thought of the times back when she had lain on the ground looking up at the dark sky through the cracks in her ceiling, and she realized someone had been listening to her prayers this whole time. How blessed she was to be by his side. To have been led to him. Are they dead? It was a soft, unfamiliar voice. The red-headed fisherman had stepped outside. He seemed taken aback, but not entirely unsettled, by the sight of the scattered leaf nin on the ground. No, said Naruto. Karen swallowed hard. While their wounds look severe, if they were treated, they would not be fatal. Is that going to be okay? Naruto knelt on the ground by the fallen leaf nin, his fingers raised in a tiger seal. By the time they wake up, we'll be long gone. And they won't remember a thing. Suddenly, the leaf nin caught in Karen's chains blurted out, we will never give up. He had been quiet until now, and while he seemed to have given up on trying to free himself, his face was contorted with angry tears. I did not want to believe what the others said about you, that you are a monster. But I understand now. You are a traitor, and a danger to the village, and we will chase you no matter how far you go. No, you won't. Stretching his hand out over the leaf nin's neck, Naruto made a twisting motion. A black character blazed over the leaf nin, and then it disappeared. What kind of seal is that? Jiraiya almost jumped at the sound, and whirled around to see Naruto regarding him from the opposing chair. For someone whose voice had only just started to crack from puberty, he was entirely too stealthy. This, my young apprentice, is a precious tool of the trade, said Jiraiya grandly, with a sweeping gesture to the body strewn across the floor. Thanks to this luckless fellow and his propensity for talking under the influence of a drink and a willing ear, I've made more than enough headway in my research. The moment he wakes up, he'll be out howling for your blood. After all this time they had spent traveling together, it was remarkable how unconcerned the boy seemed to be for Jiraiya's well-being. Minato had never been so callous. Perhaps Naruto took after his mother in this regard? And that's where the seal comes in handy. It's a little something I picked up back in the day. By the time I'm done, this fellow will think all of this was just a very, very bad dream. So it isn't the taboo seal? Jiraiya stopped, the jovial smile on his face fading a degree. Where'd you learn about that? I heard the fourth Hokage invented it. As usual, Naruto's face was blank. But in Jiraiya's long-spanning career, he had yet to meet anyone who could truly hide the depth of their thoughts, and he saw a glimmer of it now in his eyes. Yes, so he did. But you know, after the fact, Minato always regretted it. The taboo seal is forbidden for a reason. It is a terrible seal, leaving the victim at the mercy of their own mind. No, there is absolutely no reason why it should ever be used. The sky was black, the moon was bright, and the air was cold. It was midsummer, but up here in snow country, it wasn't unusual to see snow throughout the year, and given how he'd just been thrown out of the last 3 taverns he'd visited, Jiraiya considered it a blessing that he wasn't knee-deep. He could have always used a henge, of course, but perhaps as a consequence of the sake currently swirling around in his belly, he couldn't seem to muster one. Stumbling, Jiraiya clumsily sat down on the hard ground. Tipping his head back, he tried to pour another pint of sake into his mouth, craving the sear and burning it in his throat, but nothing came out. Grunting, he peered into the opening of the pint. It was empty. There was nothing left. Jiraiya looked around to see a large lake nearby, its dark surface frozen over. He reared back his arm, about to fling the bottle into the lake when, after a moment's consideration, he lowered it and placed it gently on the ground in front of him. "Forgive me, little one," he said genially to the bottle. "You have fulfilled your duty." There was no response, but he hadn't expected one. After that, Jiraiya looked out at the lake for a long time. Chapter 46: Clear Black Sea. Before an enraptured audience, figures dressed in rich robes and garish masks moved slowly across the raised platform. A hollow flute melody accompanied the sound of twanging strings, and 2 voices rang out in reverberating tones. "The wind is cold beyond these slopes. Are you really leaving? Though this life is all I have known, I must find my destiny." In that evening's performance, as the story of a young man leaving his poor island village to become a great warrior unfolded on the stage, the audience was a particularly receptive one, laughing at every joke, clapping at every success, and weeping over every death. One notably expressive individual sat in a gilded chair in his own private box, surrounded by a cohort of attendants and armed guards as he dabbed at his eyes with his handkerchief. An elderly man with graying hair and dark circles under his eyes, his features would not have stood out if not for the large headpiece denoting his rank. He was a daimyo, and not just any daimyo. He was the Fire Daimyo, ruler of one of the 5 great shinobi countries. "Halt, stranger. I have not seen one of your likes around here before. Name your purpose." "I have but one purpose, to learn the way of the warrior." "That you shall find here." Going to the theater was one of the daimyo's favorite ways of winding down after a hard day's work. But it had been a particularly trying week, and even as the daimyo found himself engaged in the story on the stage, a part of his mind continued to ponder over the current state of affairs. The Leaf Village had been attacked, resulting in a number of casualties, including none other than the Hokage. In the following emergency, the replacement the daimyo had chosen by recommendation from his advisors had proven to be a surly brute of a man. Responding to the daimyo's goodwill with curt statements that could at best be described as graceless, and at worst insubordinate, the daimyo was beginning to wonder whether his decision to nominate the next Hokage had been brash. "Have you no master, boy? You shall die within the fortnight to your enemy." "I have no master anymore, this is true. But neither have I an enemy." "You fool. Your enemies circle you as we speak." Not to mention that, the last the daimyo had heard, the Wind Daimyo had gone into hiding out of fear of being assassinated by his own subjects. The only remotely good news was that the hidden cloud had been razed to the ground, leaving Lightning Country virtually defenseless. The leader of Lightning Country had been getting far too cocky lately. Personally speaking, the Fire Daimyo was glad to see his rival getting taken down a peg. All in all, it was a real mess, the likes of which the daimyo hadn't seen since the last Shinobi World War. "Is it true? You can take me across this endless sea?" "There is a price, of course. There is always a price." "Name it, sir, and I shall pay for it." Amidst the tumultuous passage of time, it had been some years since the daimyo had reflected on the last war. Following on the heels of the First World War, the Second War had erupted in the beginning of the daimyo's reign, when he was still fresh-faced and eager to prove himself as his predecessor's equal. Many had died in that war, and other daimyo had been toppled quicker than they could be officially crowned. Even the Whirlpool village had been overrun and their daimyo overthrown, which given their reputation for fuinjutsu had been greatly shocking at the time. Though, with all things considered, that had probably been for the best in opinion. Of course, the Fire Daimyo had always taken care to conceal beneath a sympathetic, stoic demeanor. Still, no matter the current conflict, the daimyo wasn't too concerned. He was no longer the overeager greenhorn of his early reign. He had survived countless crises over the years, and he would survive this, too. Once the dust had settled, everything would be returned to its rightful place, and the world would continue onwards. As it always had. Take this weapon, for it is all I can give you. Farewell. Have you no other last words for me? Everything you require you already possess. You need only realize it. Now hurry, the sun is setting, and the night is nigh. Shifting comfortably in his seat, the daimyo returned his full attention to the play. The coming scenes were his favorite, and he didn't want to miss a single moment. Walking over to Tenten's prone body, Naruto tugged out his tanto. The lightning chakra had cauterized her wound, and it came out smoothly. Wiping off the darkened blood, he sheathed it. Before he could turn away, Rai's words flashed in his head again. This is Tenten, guys, and Naruto looked hard at the kunoichi's pale, drawn face. When she woke up, she would have no recollection of his whereabouts, or of how close his blade had been to her heart. The effects were courtesy of the taboo seal, the same seal that had once entrapped Naruto as a child, and the irony of the reverse situation was not lost upon him. If the truth ever came out, they would doubtless call him a monster for this as well. Though, given the situation, Naruto hadn't had any other choice, aside from outright killing them. A distant, clarifying thought surfaced. Was that why the Hokage had used the taboo seal on him all those years ago? I thought for sure you were Leafnin, said the red-haired man, his eyes roving from body to body. But it seems I was wrong. Both his tone and expression seemed neutral in the true sense of the word, rather than the carefully schooled facade that Naruto was used to seeing, and out in the daylight, the man's features were more apparent than they had been in the shadows of the pub. With freckles scattered across his face, he was younger than Naruto had first thought, and his frame was stockier than it had appeared before. We're looking for the way to the hidden whirlpool, said Naruto. You know how to get there, don't you? The man's gaze drifted to Naruto's face, and after a moment's search, he nodded. I do. Well, that wasn't so hard, said Karen, her eyebrows shooting up. Sitting down hard by the splintered remains of the stairwell, the man reached into his pocket and produced a carton of cigarettes. You're not the first travelers to have searched for the hidden whirlpool, far from it. Nor will you be the last. While the way has been blocked off to all those who wish any harm to the village, it has been my duty for the past several years to guide those with a legitimate claim. The monotonous and rapid delivery of his lines reminded Naruto of one of the seasoned tour guides who'd used to take envoys from other villages around the Hidden Leaf scenic route. It was clear the man had spoken those very same words many times before. Your duty? Naruto echoed. Is the village active? I suppose it must be. How has the whirlpool existed all these years without catching the eye of the leaf? Their scouts wouldn't have missed any patterns of traffic over time near Fire Country borders. The man let out an exhale of smoke that could have also been a sigh. Very few enter the hidden whirlpool. And even fewer leave. What's that supposed to mean? Demanded Karen. Are you saying that they don't let people leave? Everyone is free to leave the village. But there is no need to leave the village. Naruto couldn't detect a lie in his cryptic words. However, as was often the case, it was not what was actually spoken that he paid attention to, but rather the intent behind it. This man, long-suffering attitude aside, wanted them to go to the hidden whirlpool. Perhaps, somehow, he had even been waiting for them. The real question was the risk of walking into what was most likely a trap worth the unclear benefits? Unfortunately, their time was limited. In the not-so-far distance, Naruto could sense something stirring. The sleepy village had finally caught on to the destruction of the pub. The man must have sensed it as well, because he rose to his feet. The rest of your questions will have to wait. Come meet me by the shore on the night of the full moon. Though, now that my cover here has been blown, I imagine I'll have to move on from this post soon. The man exhaled another thin plume of smoke. Not that I mind. This place was kind of a dump, anyways. Seizing Tenten and Niji's bodies from the ground, Naruto took one last look back at the red-haired man. Who is your enemy? As the sounds of shouts drew closer, he said, my name is Naruto. What's your name? At that, the man's lips reared back to reveal a row of surprisingly sharp incisors. Yashima. Uzumaki Yashima. They'd said the village was full of traitors. They were traitors because they had evaded their dues owed to the Lightning Daimyo, and refused to send the year's quota of children for mandatory induction at the Hidden Cloud. They'd said that in order to maintain their village's reputation, the traitors needed to be taught a lesson. that it would be a good exercise in trying out Yujito's tailed beast transformation. It was a foggy day, and that helped. It didn't quite hide the smell of fire or mute the clamor, but by the time the heavy fog rolled back over the village, all was still, as though nothing had ever been there to begin with. When Yujito finally felt her claws retracting to her skin, she fell back on the ground. She was panting hard, even though, truthfully speaking, it hadn't been a difficult task at all. Blood pulsed in her ears, and she wondered at the exhaustion numbing her limbs. She'd never felt so tired before. Not even when her training was so grueling that every inch of her skin was black and blue, and she couldn't tell where bruised flesh ended and tailed beast fire began. Suddenly, she sensed something movement, concealed in the roiling fog. In a flash, Yujito leaped to her feet, her fingers sharpening into claws. "Reveal yourself." A dark shadow appeared in the fog. It grew darker and larger as it approached, and then, a boy staggered into view. The first thing Yujito noticed was that he was a civilian. The second thing she took in was the emaciated appearance of his frame, an orphan out on the streets, perhaps. Finally, she looked at his face. Heavy-set eyes, and a crop of white hair that stood out starkly against his dark skin. "Who are you?" Yujito demanded. "What are you doing here?" Why hadn't he tried to run away, like all the others? They called me Dari," said the boy, with a gulp. "You're really strong, lady. Can you teach me to be like that too?" It was a memory she had been desperately trying to suppress, but it surged with a vengeance now at the sight of the young man lying at Yujito's feet. Physically, he was as different as one could get from the Dari of her memories, but she still couldn't help but draw parallels as she cautiously drew closer. Just as quickly, however, the details that were cropping up with every sweep of his appearance sent Yujito's thoughts racing in all new directions. A large chakra signature. The sand Hittite. The blood-red tattoo on his forehead. This man was the infamous Jinchuriki of the hidden sand. There were no ifs, ands or buts about it. A genin from her village could have pieced it together. It all but confirmed her suspicions that Akatsuki's attack on the hidden cloud had not been isolated. Given the circumstances surrounding their attack and the flurry of covert movement Yujito had noticed in every country she traveled to so far, she had grimly prepared herself for the worst. But if the hidden sands Jinchuriki was wandering alone, half dead, in the wilderness, the sheer scale of the possible implications was chilling. The Reikage had always told their village that the Fourth World War was coming. It was the reason why even through the armistice, the hidden cloud had continually worked to extend their military reach. Yet, here they were at the cusp of war, and their village had been burned to the ground without even being graced with a chance at retaliation. Yujito reached out with a hand, before immediately pulling it back as a whip of sand lashed out at her. Instead of chasing her, the sand retreated into the gourd slung across the Jinchuriki's back. The Jinchuriki was in no condition to be defending himself, so it had to be an automatic defense mechanism. Perhaps it was the One-Tail's influence? Suddenly, the Jinchuriki spasmed, his arms growing stiff by his side as his back arched. His eyes rolled back and he let out a monstrous scream that didn't quite match up to the ragged movement of his mouth. The haze around him was starting to turn red, almost like volcanic steam, and Yujito felt her stomach knotting at the sight. At first glance, it was just an untrained Jinchuriki form, but something was different. The chakra shroud didn't so much look like it was corroding the Jinchuriki as it was assimilating him. As for the source of this distortion, blue flames exploding in her hands, Yujito lunged forward for the site where the haze was densest above the coastal margin, just left of the midline of his sternum. His heart. For the past several years, the medic had worked hard to grow her residence into a proper clinic. What had started out as a cot in a shed had expanded into proper hospital beds, each set up with their own 4-unit, alongside a well-stocked cabinet of a wide spectrum of antibiotics and pain medications. Not a single day passed without incident, whether it was a patient initially coming in for stitches and a round of antibiotics before spasming from acute sepsis due to a poisoned kunai blade, or a patient coming in to restock on meds, before abruptly going into sudden cardiac arrest due to chronic chakra pill abuse. The medic had seen just about everything there was to see. So when an unidentifiable shinobi turned up at the medic's door with a squad of half-dead Leaf Nin in tow, she didn't bat an eye. "You're the medic?" The young ninja who spoke was of nondescript appearance, which tended to be the norm for her usual clientele. Her no questions asked policy had made her clinic a popular destination amongst those with no allegiance to any of the major hidden villages. The medic gave a curt nod. Yes, I am. Assuming they're all still alive, I'm afraid I don't have enough beds for 3. Money is of no concern. The ninja threw over a pouch, which the medic snatched out of the air. Drawing it open, she counted the coins, and then nodded to her assistant, who hurried forward to check the bodies. 2 males, 1 female, all looking thoroughly beaten up. The female especially looked in need of immediate attention. A 3-man cell. Even if they hadn't been bearing the Hittite, their uniforms were a dead giveaway as to their identities. Leafneen, of middling rank, at least. What were they doing here? And who was the man bringing them in? The medic couldn't spot A8 on his person. Well, it wasn't her problem. Not anymore, at least. Very well, she said. I trust one can count on your discretion, said the ninja, a hint of steel in his tone. You wouldn't be here if you knew you couldn't, the medic replied just as pleasantly, fingering the poison hidden up her sleeve. Will you be back for them? What do you mean? Said the ninja. I was never here. Then, in a whirlwind of dust, he disappeared. You there, my dear? Amidst the hubbub of the lively market, Karen had to look around and then point at herself before the elderly woman gesturing from her stall nodded her head. Yes, you. Come here, I have something for you. The little chakra that the woman had harbored no malice, and when Karen drew near, she realized that the old woman was draped in sparkling jewelry. I'm not interested, Karen began, but before she could finish her sentence, the woman swooped in with a speed that could have put a Gen to shame. Now. I can tell with just a single glance you're suffering from love problems, aren't you? Love problems? Karen stammered, her face flushing. TSK, it's written all over your little face. Let me guess, your feelings are one-sided? And you haven't been able to pluck up the courage to tell him? Karen flushed harder, and the woman's eyes gleamed with opportunity. Well, I have just the thing here. Something shone in the daylight, and a moment later, Karen felt hands on her shoulders, turning her around, and her hair being drawn back. The woman rustled up a mirror for Karen to check her appearance. Pulling her hair back was a blue cord made up of oddly shaped stones. Karen blinked, and her reflection in the mirror did the same. She reached up to touch the stones, and the cool, serrated texture gave her a moment's pause. What kind of stone is this? Why, is this your first time to the coast? It's no stone at all. It's called a seashell, Karen faintly filled in, surprising herself. She hadn't realized that she still remembered the word. How much is it? 15 Rio, and that's a bargain, came the eager reply. I've got the cheapest prices you'll find on this side of the coast. It was rather cheap, in fact, but being who she was, Karen would have bartered the price down to at least half the initial offer. This time, however, she simply handed the bills over. He won't be able to take his eyes off you, now, chirped the woman. One of the reasons Karen had come out to the town at all had been to check on the traps she'd set along the shore. A quick check revealed 3 fish swimming restlessly in endless circles, which she filleted on the spot before stacking them in her basket, and then with another long look at her reflection she began to trek back to their hideout. Currently, they were camped out at an abandoned hut along the fringes of a neighboring forest. As always, Karen checked the vicinity using her mind's eye, a habit and vigilance that she was quickly improving with every passing day. I'm back, she called out. A moment passed, and then, did you see anything today? A red-headed young man stepped out from the shadow of the forest. He appeared to be Naruto upon first glance, but Karen knew that it was his clone. The real Naruto had been gone for extensive swaths of time over the past week. Presumably, he was gathering intel on the movements of the Akatsuki, the Leaf Village, and whoever else was trying to track them down and kill them. Which could, at this point, be pretty much anyone. No, I couldn't detect anyone suspicious. The same people who were there yesterday were there today. The clone looked up at the darkening sky. And tonight is the full moon. Maybe that man was lying to us about being in Uzumaki. He didn't look much like you. This was met with an oddly contemplative look. I've been told I look more like my father than my mother. Leaving it at that, he stepped back into the forest. I should be coming back soon. Sure enough, Karen was almost done roasting her catches over the fire pit when she noticed in her mind's eye that the clone had disappeared. Shortly afterwards, an identical chakra signature rapidly approached their hideout. Brightening, just as she rose to her feet, Naruto's figure swooped in from the open window. "Dinner's ready," Karen said, suddenly feeling shy. For some reason, even though she felt comfortable enough around Naruto's clones, whenever Naruto himself was there, something about him felt just a little more distant. "Did you learn anything today?" When Naruto didn't respond straight away, Karen recognized the unfocused look in his eyes. He was processing the memories of all the clones he just called back. While anyone else in Naruto's position would likely have long since passed out from both chakra and mental exhaustion due to the sheer number of clones he was controlling, the only physical hint of it that Karen could see was the darkened shadows under his eyes. Once his gaze refocused, Karen knew he was all caught up for the day. "Danzo has sent out quite a few hunter-nines in pursuit of us, but not as many as I'd expected. He seems to be prioritizing the continued safety of the village instead." Naruto sounded perplexed at his own words even, Karen dared to think, disappointed. "Anyways, I doubt Yashima would have gone too far from the coast, which can only mean that, as we thought, he has a way of hiding from your mind's eye." Karen frowned. Somehow, the thought that her ability may not be totally unique to her stung a little. "I guess there's even more to the hidden whirlpool than we thought." The roasted fish was scorching hot to the touch, and as Karen blew on her portion to cool it down, it reminded her, somewhat, of her home back in grass country. She glanced over at Naruto, who remained seated on the floor, staring into the flickering flames of the fire pit. "We'll get there," said Karen. "No matter what." Even if, privately, she was starting to have second thoughts about going there. Naruto looked up at her. "Yes. I have no doubt." He paused, his brow furrowing as he seemed to finally take in her appearance. "You look different." Both Karen's heart and her hand jumped up. "I tied up my hair, so it doesn't get in the way." Something about the look on his face made her stomach flip-flop. "You don't like it? The blue doesn't look good in my hair, huh?" "It looks nice," said Naruto. "It just reminded me of someone." Something about the expression on his face caused a pang in Karen's chest. "It reminded me of someone, too. My mom. She used to have a necklace with a similar-looking stone. A seashell." "What happened to it?" "Someone stole it," she said ruefully. "I hadn't thought about it in a long time, but there was someone selling this in the market for 15 ryo. Good price, huh?" She paused. "Or maybe it was wasteful. I don't really know." "Not bad," Naruto said simply, before returning to his meal. He didn't press further, and Karen could tell it was not out of courtesy, but rather out of a lack of interest. It was strange, she thought, because he seemed to thirst for knowledge about many things. And yet when it came to certain topics, his indifference was like a blank wall. "What about you?" Karen asked. Your clone, said you look more like your dad than your mom. Where are they?" "They died when I was born." Karen winced. Oh. It shouldn't have surprised her. Orphans were hardly a rare statistic in their part of the world. "I'm sorry." "What for?" "I never knew them." "Well, yes," she said, blinking. "But isn't it normal to miss your family?" "I wouldn't know," said Naruto. "I've never had one." He sounded bemused, more than anything, and somehow, that gave Karen more pause than his actual response. She opened her mouth, searching for the words to say when something dark in the periphery of her mind flashed, and she froze. All other thoughts leaving her head, Karen squeezed her eyes shut, and confirmed it in her mind's eye, before saying out loud, "Naruto, it's him. Yashima, he's nearby." Everything was hazy and red. He couldn't differentiate what was what, and it had been that way for as long as he could remember. It was all jumbled up. The skies, his hands. A voice screaming in his splitting head. "Gaara! Stop!" He was no stranger to screaming voices, but this voice, it was not the one he was used to hearing. And while once upon a time, he would have killed anyone who dared try and stop him, now that he was well and truly alone, he just wanted it all to end. "As you wish," said a voice. His eyes opened, and for a long moment, he lay prone, wondering what had changed. It was dark, though he could hear the crackling and feel the warmth of a nearby fire. He must have been in a cave of some sort. He could sense the whistling of wind through cracks in the rock, and the drip of water seeping into the hard ground. As for himself, his lips were parched and his entire body hurt, but he could feel his heart thumping in his chest, and he suddenly realized how quiet it all was. That was what had changed. "You're awake," said a woman's voice. Gaara turned his head. Even the slight motion of it sent a sharp spasm through his back, and saw an unfamiliar woman with long blonde hair tied back. From where she sat behind the fire, he couldn't spot any obvious identifiers such as a Hittite, but her presence and physique made it clear she was a ninja, and a powerful one at that. Somehow, Gaara had the feeling that even his sand armor wouldn't mount much of a defense against this foreign woman. He felt completely exposed, as though he'd lain back in the mouth of his enemy and bared his neck. And yet, as vulnerable as he was, he felt calm. "What did you do to me?" he croaked. The dark sea basked in the glow of the full moon. Its surface was so startlingly still, if it wasn't for the sound of the waves in his ears and the feel of the high tide brushing the undersides of their sandals, Naruto would have thought they were looking out at a lake. The man who'd called himself Yashima had discarded his fisherman garb for a black robe that blended into their surroundings, making it appear as though his face was floating in midair. He was waiting for them in a wooden boat with a large sculling oar in one hand and a smoldering cigarette in the other. The boat bobbed haphazardly in the water as Naruto and Karen stepped aboard. "We're going out there in this?" Karen voiced skeptically. Yashima shrugged. "It's the only boat I've still got left in one piece." Leaving it to them to infer his meaning, he pushed off, and the boat began to glide through the water. As the creaking of the boat filled Naruto's ears and the shore at their backs grew smaller, for a moment, he looked up at the night sky. The full moon was so large, and so bright, it almost looked like the sun. "In my village, the moon has always been considered an object of worship," said Yashima, with another exhale of smoke. "She controls the tides, which in turn create the whirlpools that have always protected our nation." As though in response, the lapping of waves against the side of the boat grew stronger, and the boat began to lurch. "Is this going to get much worse?" Karen asked, nervously. "I'm afraid this is just the beginning," said Yashima, looking amused. "You said that your name is Uzumaki," said Naruto. "Are there others with that name in your village?" "Oh, yes. The Uzumaki clan was one of the founding clans at the time of the village's establishment." "How has your village kept its continued survival a secret for this long?" "We tried very hard," Yashima replied. "He's lying, Naruto," said Karen, leveling a dirty look at the man. Yashima let out a laugh, a startling sound that broke in the air like waves on a rocky shore. "I am many things, but I am no liar. I assure you that. Now, we are approaching whirlpool territory. From now on, whatever you do, try not to leave the boat." The roar of the water was growing increasingly louder. Naruto looked back out at the sea to see that it was churning. The boat rocked wildly, to the point that Naruto had to channel chakra to his feet to stop himself from losing his balance, and cold seawater sprayed his face. A drifting cluster of clouds must have passed by, because suddenly, the moon disappeared. The sky darkened, and the sea turned black. Whatever was still below his feet began to spin in circles, and seawater sloshed around his legs. "Naruto!" shouted Karen's voice. "Karen!" he replied. "Use your chains." But there was no reply. Or, if there was, he couldn't hear it over the sound of the roar of the water that circled around them. Had Yashima been lying about guiding them? No, he may not have been entirely forthcoming, but he had been telling the truth about that. Gritting his teeth against the salt of the seawater, Naruto reached out with a hand to position himself. And suddenly the clouds passed. The full moon hung in the sky once more, stark in its brightness, and everything stopped. The boat no longer rocked. The water that had threatened to submerge them had disappeared, and the sea around them was still. It was quiet, unnaturally so, and when Naruto looked around, he was the only one on the boat. Both Yashima and Karen were gone. But somehow, even though he couldn't see or hear anything, even though he wasn't using his lightning chakra, he could sense a presence. Naruto's hand leapt to the tanto on his back, and he straightened up. "Who's there?" he called out. While there was no response, he knew he wasn't alone. There could only be one explanation for this. It was of some sort, which meant somebody had to be behind it. He brought his hands together in a seal to disrupt his chakra and dissipate the illusion, but nothing changed. Something sounded in his ears, like the distant sound of waves and the rustling of leaves. Stepping towards the rim of the boat, Naruto looked down at the water's surface. His reflection glared back up at him, the whisker marks on his face glowing in the moonlight. He reached out with a hand to break the reflection when, suddenly, another face appeared next to his. A girl's face. "Mayu," said Naruto. She didn't respond. But she didn't run away either, and when he looked up, she was still there, standing next to him. Appearance-wise, Mayu looked the same as she always did when she appeared to him, pale-faced, with long brown hair pinned back with a blue clip, and in standard leaf chunin attire. She looked the same as she had on the day she died, and Naruto suddenly realized that he was older than her now. Wordlessly, Mayu reached out to his face. Her fingers were warm when they had no right to be, and then suddenly, an even warmer pair of lips pressed against his. Naruto's eyes widened, and his mind went blank, but before he could react, the sensation was already falling away, and then Mayu was stepping over the boat's edge. Walking across the still water, she turned around and held her hand out to Naruto in a clear invitation. Naruto considered the phantom staring at him, his lips burning. If Mayu had survived that day, how would she look now? Would she have been hunting Naruto down at the orders of the new Hokage with the rest of them? Or would she have quit active duty by now, and begun working with orphans, as she'd once wanted? He would never know. "I can't go with you," said Naruto. Frowning, Mayu gestured more insistently, to which he stood his ground. A dark look passed over her face, and then, in an instant, Mayu's features contorting in a way that he'd never seen before, she lunged towards him. Her slender fingers, now impossibly cold, wrapped around Naruto's neck, choking him with an alien strength he knew that she didn't possess, as she tried to drag him off the boat and into the ocean. For a moment, Naruto didn't retaliate. Instead, through the pain of his windpipe being crushed, he thought of the girl who had haunted his memories for the past 3 years, and he thought about everything he had decided to do. That hole inside of you, nothing in this world will ever fill it. At the memory of the masked man's words, Naruto's mouth drew back in a rough grin. He croaked out, "Isn't this enough?" There was no response from the phantom, who continued to strangle him with single-minded determination. The black of the ocean was beginning to bleed into his vision, and staggering, Naruto reached out. It was over in an instant. Mayu's eyes looked into his, then down at the tanto jutting out of her chest. He plunged it in so deep, he could only see the tip of the hilt. Her hands fell lifelessly from his neck, and as Naruto gasped for air, her lips mouthed a single word, before she fell back into the water with a crash. At the sight of her shadow plummeting into the depths of the ocean, somehow, Naruto felt simultaneously lighter and colder. "Who is your enemy?" The floor of the boat rocked, and Naruto lurched again when an iron grip steadied him by the arm. He turned to see Yashima, who regarded him with surprised scrutiny, before pulling away to take another drag of his cigarette. Karen lay next to him, seemingly unconscious. With a sharp exhale, Naruto checked for her pulse, before sitting heavily back down. After a moment, he checked his own neck, but there was no sign that he'd ever been strangled. He reached for his back next. His tanto was gone. Naruto's hand dropped to his side. "What was that?" "Proof of the blood running through your veins. Proof of the conviction needed to enter the hidden whirlpool." Yashima pointed eagerly. "Look, we're almost home." What had first appeared to be an extension of the night sky turned into an array of glimmering lights in the distance. And then dark silhouettes appeared on the horizon, growing bigger and bigger, until finally, they became a harbor. Buildings. Lights. Other boats bobbing in the water. And smaller figures that dotted the dock's people. The people of the hidden whirlpool. A distance away, back on the coastline that marked the end of Fire Country territory, a solitary figure in a black cloak with red clouds stood on the sandy shore. He looked out at the clear, black sea, lit up in the glow of the full moon, thinking about the past. "Kakashi, you promised me. Protect Rin, whatever it takes." Back then, he had been a different person. He had thought such things, and felt such things, because he had known absolutely nothing about anything. because he had still held expectations from this nonsensical world. The Sharingan's full power is unleashed when left and right are brought together, removing the orange mask that both concealed and defined his identity. He fixed both of his red eyes on the distant horizon. Isn't that right? A hiss and a distorted flickering in his consciousness alerted him. There's been a sighting of the remaining Jinchuriki, a voice spoke in his head. We believe they may be somewhere in river country. At that, he roused himself. With one last look at the sea, he turned to leave. Every piece was playing out their role as he predicted. And he would make sure that they continued to do so, until the world was finally as it should be, for that was the role he had been assigned. But for now would keep watching. He was always watching. Chapter 47, Dead Sea. Summary of story until now, it's long. First arc, ch1 to 7. Uzumaki Naruto was born with his mom's hair color, his dad's everything else. When he turned 6, he lost control of the Nine Tails, and to control him, the Hokage had to put a taboo seal on him that stops Naruto from ever suspecting he's a Jinchuriki. While the village pariah, he starts attending the ninja academy, and teaches himself a lot through sheer hard work and through texts. He gets put in Kakashi's team with 2 others, Rai and Mayu, who don't trust him. They go on a mission to Yudakure, where he first encounters Haiden. Through this experience, Mayu and Rai slowly begin to warm up to Naruto. Second arc, ch8 to 17. Chunin exam and Sunigakure. Encounters with another Jinchuriki, Fu, prompt Naruto to start fighting against the taboo seal, an attempt that goes rather poorly as Naruto begins to experience increased headaches. During the third exam, Naruto passes out entirely, and Kakashi figures out that the seal is on him, before blocking it. Naruto faces off against Fu, and though he borrows some of the Nine Tails chakra for the first time to use the Rasengan, he still narrowly loses. On the return journey home, Fu gets her tailed beast extracted by the Akatsuki. Naruto talks to the Hokage, gets some answers, and the seal is permanently removed. Third arc, ch18 to 27. Naruto leads a bodyguard mission to Wave Country, meeting Sai for the first time, and being unknowingly trailed by Kakashi. Their client is attacked on the way there, and this eventually leads to an encounter with Team Shirakumo, Sakura, Sasuke, Menma. A strange missive from the Hokage forces Naruto to make the decision to keep his team there. Their client Kane enlists the reluctant help of the Konoha ninjas in a plan to rescue the daimyo and his family from the hands of Gato to further their cause of helping Tazuna build his bridge. Though Jiraiya joins in as well, the plan goes awry when Mayu and Tazuna get captured, and it turns out Kane was actually working for the Akatsuki. Tobi lets Mayu escape, but unfortunately, she encounters Zabuza and before she is killed, manages to send her bluebirds to Naruto. Kakashi, racing to find his team, finds Tazuna and faces off against Zabuza. Before Kakashi can finish off Zabuza, Tobi appears and kills him. The others clash with Haiden and Kakuzu at Gato's hideout. Shirakumo and Rai are killed but manage to incapacitate Haiden. Naruto fights against Haku and cuts off his hand but spares him. When he returns from his fight, he finds a dying Rai and reassures him that Mayu is alive. Having lost his team, Naruto breaks down and lets the Nine Tails take over. While he is running rampant, Kakashi arrives and is able to calm Naruto down. Kakuzu abandons Haiden and runs away. Everyone returns home. A despondent Naruto decides to leave with Jiraiya to go training. Fourth arc, ch 28 to 41. Several characters are introduced, namely Haku, who is currently a refugee at the Hidden Rain, Gaara, who's as crazy and bloodthirsty as ever, Sasuke, who is growing frustrated within the confines of the Hidden Leaf, and Karen, who is being abused by her village for her special ability to heal. She runs into Naruto while she is weakened and starving, and he shows her a small act of kindness which begins her infatuation with him. Meanwhile, Naruto receives training under Jiraiya, which is namely mastering lightning release, picking up a fox summons, and sage training. Naruto continues to struggle with immense feelings of guilt and emptiness from the loss of his team, and no longer knows what he wants to do. After 3 years, they return to the Hidden Leaf, which is in the middle of hosting a Chunin exam. Haku, Gaara, and Karen are all in attendance. Naruto is promoted to Jonin status and accompanies Hinata on an escort mission. They discover that the Akatsuki is hunting down the Jinchuriki, and will be attacking the Hidden Leaf. While they rush back, Naruto is haunted by several phantoms of his past representing multiple facets of his insecurities and his lingering guilt. One of his clones transmits the knowledge that Kakashi is in grave danger, and Naruto desperately races to his help. He makes it in time to face Tobi, who expresses that they are similar. Tobi takes Kakashi's Sharingan and disappears. Meanwhile, the whole hidden sand/sound scheme occurs similarly to Canon, with Gaara on the rampage. Naruto easily takes down Gaara, who in a confused state kills Temari. Karen sees Naruto in danger and unleashes sealing chains for the first time to subjugate Gaara. In the chaos, Haku manages to sneak up on Kakashi and delivers a fatal blow. However, Karen is able to use her chakra to heal Kakashi just in time. Elsewhere, the hidden cloud is attacked by Kisame and Deidara, and Tobi seizes control of the wreckage. Killer Bee is captured, but Yujito manages to escape. While Jiraiya is fighting Sasori, the Hokage is killed, and Jiraiya kills Orochimaru in retaliation. In the aftermath, all foreign ninja are temporarily imprisoned and Danzo becomes interim Hokage because Jiraiya leaves the village. A dying Itachi staggers back to the hidden leaf. Though Hinata tries to help him, he is imprisoned. 5th Arc, ch. 42. Naruto realizes that he is being watched by Root. He breaks Karen out of her cell and tells her that he wants to destroy the ninja system. She agrees to help him. They then break out an unconscious Gaara. Naruto's clone meets with Kakashi, who is bewildered, but informs Naruto that Karen's chains can control the Nine Tails. In a meeting with Danzo, Itachi manages to use his crow's Kodo Amatsukami on Danzo and commands him to serve the people of the Hidden Leaf. Itachi dies. When Gaara wakes up, he flips out again and Naruto and Karen leave him behind. Yujito soon runs into Gaara. Haku, who had been branded by Orochimaru with the curse seal, and his team, are guided back to Rain Country by Kabuto. They then encounter a young, female Akatsuki member who introduces herself as Pain. Danzo tells Sasuke that he will teach him as his pupil. Karen and Naruto look for someone to take them to the hidden whirlpool. Niji's team finds them, but Naruto defeats them and seals their memory with the taboo seal. They find a fisherman named Yashima who agrees to take them. The journey is tumultuous and yet again, Naruto faces a phantom in the form of his old teammate Mayu. It tries to drag him into the water, but he stabs it with his tanto. When he regains consciousness, they have reached the hidden village. If the story is still confusing, honestly, what was my past self thinking? I recommend you go back to at least ch. 42 and reread. Naruto was no stranger to being at the receiving end of an inordinate number of stares, but as he lifted up Karen's unconscious body and stepped onto the dock, the experience somehow felt alien. It could probably be attributed to the fact that even though the level of scrutiny was the same, the vast majority of the staring seemed curious, rather than hostile. Even at nighttime, the harbor was well lit with torch lamps that brought the features of the people of the hidden whirlpool into shadowy relief. A quick glance told Naruto that they were not as homogeneous as he might have expected. Coloring ranged almost as much as one would see in the Leaf Village, with perhaps a modest predilection towards red hair. More surprisingly, the vast majority appeared to be civilians, with the few obvious shinobi concentrated near the front. They surrounded an elderly group, who, given the respectful birth from the rest, held some significance in the village. Is an outsider's arrival such an uncommon event here? Naruto asked. Yashima seemed preoccupied scanning the crowd, his cigarette conspicuously missing from his mouth, and his reply was curt, "Quite." An elderly woman approached them, holding out a stone cup with a dark, steaming beverage. She motioned towards Karen, who remained resolutely unconscious. "Please, have your companion drink this. It will help wake her." Taking the cup, Naruto regarded the woman who smiled pleasantly back before lifting it to his own lips to swish the liquid around in his mouth. Herbs, ginger, and something faintly sweet. After pouring a few drops from the flask into Karen's mouth, her eyes flew open. What happened?" she asked, blinking in her disorientation. "One moment we were on the boat, and the next, I saw she stopped as she took in the crowd surrounding them, her eyes widening. Is this the hidden whirlpool?" "It is," said the woman kindly. "Welcome home. You are safe here now." "Home?" "That's right," said a low, gravelly voice. "You are our brethren, for the island has accepted you." The voice belonged to an older man who stood at the forefront of the elderly group Naruto had spotted earlier on. His long white hair and goatee suggested an age that did not quite match the visible strength in his frame and eyes, and for a moment, Naruto's thoughts flashed towards the memory of the third Hokage. The island? Karen repeated slowly. Then what I saw that wasn't real? I'm afraid not, said the older man. That was the effect of a seal placed around the entirety of the island, to prevent the likes of outsiders from crossing our borders. He spat out the word as though it was poison in his mouth. Oh, said Karen, blinking rapidly. I knew it couldn't be for a moment. Naruto caught a glimpse of wetness in her eyes, but she blinked, and it was gone. Gesturing to Karen, the woman said, Come. You will need to rest to fully recover from the after-effects. Instead of following after the woman, Karen looked back at Naruto. The older man must have noticed, for he added, I give you my word, as the chieftain of the hidden whirlpool, that no harm shall come to either of you here. I'm sure you have many questions, and I assure you, I have many answers. Answers? Naruto inclined his head. Then to start, how do you know about us? The older man took a step forward. I've been waiting for you for quite some time now. My name is Uzumaki Ashina. It's time we had a talk about your family, Naruto. What did you do to me? Croaked Gaara. The nearby fire crackled, sending sparks flying in the direction of the ninja, regarding him with an unreadable expression. So you've already noticed. Then again, I don't know how you've managed to last this long with such a primitive seal. Seal? Without responding, the ninja rose to her feet and approached Gaara. He tensed, but before he could push his aching body to move, she was already kneeling beside him. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out what looked like a ration bar, and pressed it into his hand. Go on. Sit up and eat. You'll need your energy back to heal. From the sharp tonality of her words, Gaara could tell she was used to giving out commands. It was the type of voice that would have once infuriated him, but everything was so quiet now, he obediently brought the ration bar to his lips. As someone raised in the hidden sand, he was no stranger to the threat of poison in his sustenance. But without any hesitation, he bit into it, and found it to be surprisingly flavorful and savory, with a hint of an unfamiliar spice. It reminded Gaara of the food in some of the northern countries he'd visited during his missions. The ninja offered him a skin of water that he gulped down, and waited until he was done, before she said, You are the Jinchuriki of the hidden sand, are you not? Normally, Gaara would not have answered, but everything was so quiet, that before he could stop himself, he answered, Yes. I am. What did you do to me? To his surprise, she seemed amused. Where to begin? Let's just say the hidden sand has never been very good at fuinjutsu. Too busy playing with their puppets, I suppose. They were always resorting to stealing intel from other villages, and in your case, they used an incomplete version of a seal from my village to make you a Jinchuriki. So all I had to do was actually finish the seal. Jinchuriki? That meant this woman knew who what Gaara was. And yet, she didn't seem afraid of him. On the contrary, she seemed to hardly even count him as a threat. Suddenly, her last few words registered in Gaara's mind, and he felt his eyes widen. Finish the seal? The ninja spread her hands open. If I were to liken the former state of your seal to a wall, there would be a gaping hole in it. While not quite big enough for the tailed beast to escape, there was plenty of room for it to rampage freely. But now, I've replaced the hole with a door, so to speak. A door that the tailed beast doesn't have the liberty to open. A door that only one person has the key to. The ninja smiled in a way that didn't reach her cold eyes. Me, of course. Despite Ashina's bold proclamation, the man soon disappeared into the crowd, and it was the elderly woman that had given them the drink who took Naruto and Karen to a complex at the center of the village. As they made their way there, past even more gawking faces, Naruto quickly realized that the island nation was smaller than he had expected, spanning roughly a quarter of the size of the Leaf Village. And yet, even without tapping into his sage abilities, he could sense a vitality in the land that could very well rival that of the Hidden Leaf. A powerful undercurrent of energy thrummed deeply throughout the island, leaving Naruto with the unsettling realization that the land of whirlpools was far from the weakened nation in hiding he had expected. Which begged another question. Despite the barriers the hidden whirlpool had erected around their nation, the sheer energy radiating from the island was akin to a lighthouse by the sea. It was hard to believe the other great nations could have missed their continued existence for this long. And also, why? Why had they continued the pretense of their demise? The woman came to a stop in front of a plain concrete high-rise apartment that appeared to be otherwise unoccupied. Here we are. This is where you two will be staying for now, until we can get you properly processed. You can, of course, pick separate rooms or share one. She trailed off meaningfully. Someone will come by soon with your meals. You must be famished. Sure enough, a young woman, also red-haired, knocked on the door with a tray laden with bowls of meat stew and fruits. Once the woman had left, Karen eyed the meal with a doubtful look. They wouldn't poison us at this point, right? Without a word, Naruto summoned a clone who, shooting him a sour look, tasted the stew, before the two tucked into what felt like their first meal in ages. The food was hearty and filling, and Karen soon knocked out afterwards on a futon they'd found inside the room. Naruto, too restless to sleep, slipped out onto the veranda. The rest of the island seemed to still be awake despite the late hour. The lights of the harbor didn't waver, and in the distance, voices buzzed in conversation. Naruto wondered how the situation was in the Leaf Village, and if anything had happened to Kakashi and his team for letting him go. With Danzo as Hokage, and the Akatsuki on the hunt, he couldn't imagine a worse scenario. For now, however, he had time. Borrowed, but useful all the same. He had to use the opportunity wisely to fully make sense of the power locked inside of him. Finally, feeling the burden of exhaustion tug at him, Naruto turned to go back into the room. When he paused, a small alarm sounding in the back of his mind. Something wasn't right. The island was alive with the sound of people, but at the same time, it was a little too quiet. Something was missing, and it took a few seconds before Naruto realized what it was. Black waves lapped against the shore in the near horizon, and yet the ocean was silent. As if sensing his thoughts, a presence suddenly appeared on the level above the veranda. Ashina. Where had he come from? Even Kakashi couldn't approach Naruto without his noticing. Come with me, said the man. A door that the tail beast doesn't have the liberty to open. A door that only one person has the key to. Yujito smiled coldly. Me, of course. I see, said the Jinchuriki. He looked down at his hands, and didn't say anything else. Yujito blinked. Somehow, his reaction hadn't been quite as dramatic as she'd expected it to be. She wondered whether the tailed beast's influence hadn't been quite as damaging to his psyche as she'd presumed. Is that all you have to say? It's strange. Is this what it's like for everyone else? What do you mean? Yujito prompted, bemused at the way the Jinchuriki was looking around wide-eyed at the cave, by all appearances a genin on their first C-rank mission. The silence. It's allowed. Ah, yes. I'd imagine so. Though most, she thought sourly, were not very good at preserving it. Are you also a Jinchuriki? She blinked again. You're not quite what I expected, given the rumors I heard about you, Gaara of the Sand. He jerked in response to the name, and for a moment, Yujito caught a glimpse of the rumored beast in his eyes before he turned away. What do you want from me? I'm glad to see you're fast on the uptake. Yujito drew herself up. First things first, I want you to tell me everything that you know about the current situation involving the Akatsuki and the other hidden villages. The Jinchuriki nodded, seemingly nonplussed at the prospect of betraying his village. And then? And then you're going to help me find someone. Instead of answering, he looked straight at Yujito, as if to size her up. Despite the undeniable fact that she held the upper hand, his dark eyes betrayed no fear. She crooked a finger in anticipation when suddenly, the Jinchuriki gave her a nod. She returned it with a terse smile, and sat down. Good. We're leaving as soon as it's light out. I'd suggest you rest while you can. There's more ration bars where that came from. A pause. You're just going to trust me? Yujito let out an amused laugh. I don't trust anyone. Let alone an enemy nation's Jinchuriki, no matter how recently sealed. She wasn't going to tell him, of course, but there was no seal that couldn't be broken. Not even the legendary seal masters of Whirlpool Country had ever managed to pull off such a feat. If they had, perhaps they would have still persisted to this day. Without explanation, Ashina took Naruto to the opposite side of the village, past a gate reinforced with yellow seals. Taking in the seals, recognizing in a flash some of the techniques from his brief lessons in Fuinjutsu with Jiraiya, a pair of shinobi standing guard bowed deferentially to Ashina and uncrossed their naginata. Naruto passed into the stone compound uncontested. Unlike the main village area, which had been lit as bright as a festival and full of inquisitive eyes, it was dim and quiet enough that Naruto knew they were alone. It was an otherwise unremarkable location, looking for all intents and purposes like a generic administrative complex. And yet, Naruto's gaze sharpened. Though he couldn't put his finger on it, something about the area was not quite dangerous, but his senses were warning him to remain vigilant. "Where are you taking me?" he finally asked. His pace slowing, the older man gave him a ruminative and even surprised look. "I sense many questions from you, which is of no surprise to me. But they do not seem to be the questions I expected." "And what questions were you expecting?" Without responding, Ashina picked up his pace once more and led him to a ground-level building with drab slate tiling at the back of the compound. While dwarfed in size by the taller buildings around it, the entrance took up the entire length of the front-facing wall, giving Naruto the impression of staring into a giant cave. A shiver ran down his spine. The energy he'd felt since earlier pulsated in waves from the entrance, and he knew that whatever lay inside this building was the source of the nation's vitality. As if to dangle the prize before him, Ashina came to a sudden halt. "Did you know that the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails has always been an Uzumaki? Your predecessor was your mother, and the one before her was a prominent clanswoman before she was sent off to Fire Country. Now, why do you imagine this to be the case?" "A happy coincidence?" said Naruto drily. Ashina chuckled. "My son told me you have a measure of wits about you. I'm sure you can do better than that." "Son? So their boatman, Yashima, was the son of the chieftain. The Uzumaki clan members have large reservoirs of chakra, making them suitable Jinchuriki candidates." It wasn't a difficult conclusion to reach, even with what little information there was regarding the elusive clan. "Yes, that is quite correct." Ashina took a step back and gestured to the black opening. "But that wasn't what I asked. Why has the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails always been an Uzumaki?" Naruto paused, taking in the chieftain who regarded him back with a challenging gaze. He was a strange old man he'd only just met earlier that day, in a foreign land filled with people of unknown intentions. There was no way of knowing how long their goodwill towards them would last. Still, Naruto knew that they knew too much about him to underestimate his capabilities, and above all, despite the seeming affluence and resilience of the island, he could smell it. Desperation. Underneath his discipline and his rank, it reeked from the chieftain like a fish market on a hot summer day, and Naruto knew that there was something Ashina wanted from him. And as long as that was the case, Naruto could trust him. "I don't know," he confessed. "That's why I'm here." At that, the chieftain nodded. "Very well." Usually, the summer season meant everything was hot and sticky. Even when it rained, the raindrops were warm, sizzling like boiling water wherever they touched. And the smell was the worst when there weren't enough hands to bury the dead. The buzzing of pests and the stink of rotting flesh reached even their housing section, seeping into the grass of their roofs. But that morning was different. They hadn't seen battle in some time, and the day was cloudy, blocking the worst of the heat. When Karen opened her eyes, despite the hunger gnawing in her stomach, there was a light, almost pleasant breeze on her arms. And the air was golden. That was the only way to describe it. Rays of light, coming through the holes in their walls, enveloping her and her mother in a golden aura. Her mother was seated nearby, humming a song Karen had never heard before. Her hair, once long and flowing freely, had been cut short the other day under Zosui's orders. "What's that from?" she asked. Her mother stopped, startled. "Oh my, when did you wake up?" Her hand crept to the carved stone of her necklace. "It's a song my own mother used to sing to me a long time ago." "Your mother?" Karen blinked. She'd never considered that her mother had once been a child herself. "Where is she now?" "She returned to the sea," said her mother. "As we will, too, one day." To Karen's surprise, when she woke up the next morning, she was greeted by an attendant in what appeared to be traditional Whirlpool country robes, who had brought her a breakfast tray. Next to it, a freshly laundered robe had been laid out for her. This was such a departure from the treatment she'd long since come to expect that, for once, Karen found herself speechless as the attendant helped her change into the robes. The cloth was richer than anything she'd ever worn, and yet lightweight and breathable. Breakfast was modest fare, but the broth was rich and savory, and generously loaded with vegetables and fish. That made 2 good meals in a row truly a first for Karen. When Karen stepped out of her room, she felt like a completely different person. One of Naruto's clones was waiting for her outside the door. Judging from the shadow under his eyes, he appeared to have been standing guard throughout the night. The moment she woke up and realized she was alone, she'd attempted to track Naruto a few times with her mind's eye, but the people of Whirlpool Country all had such bright chakra signatures they were distracting. Furthermore, perhaps as a result of some sort of barrier surrounding the island, there was a strange glow enveloping every single person she could sense, further washing out Naruto's chakra. "Where's Naruto?" asked Karen. "Is he still with that old man?" "I imagine so," said the clone. "Well, is there anything I should be doing?" The clone focused his gaze on her. "I'm here to keep an eye on you. Just don't go wandering off." A warning from Naruto that Karen was to keep her head down and avoid revealing any more of her abilities. This, of course, meant that she couldn't trust a single soul in the entire country, which would be easy enough. Before meeting Naruto, Karen hadn't trusted anyone else in a long, long time. But where was Naruto? As soon as he stepped foot inside the dark entryway, Naruto sensed the change, though subtle. All sounds from the outside had disappeared. It wasn't just a matter of them being muted, but rather as though, in this space, they didn't exist. It must have been the effect of another barrier, and Naruto had to wonder what else was being filtered out from this space. The only thing there was a spiraling stairwell that plummeted into the depths of the earth. As they descended, Ashina leading the way with a torch in hand, a strange noise sounded in the distance. A hissing, restless sound that grew louder and louder until it became a roar like tempest. The events of the previous night flashed before Naruto's eyes: the churning water, the black sea, the moon in the sky, the phantom in the water dragging him below the depths, and his missing Tanto. "The island has accepted you." That was what Ashina had told them when they touched down on land. What had that illusory test been trying to determine from him? At last, just as Naruto was beginning to wonder if he'd been tricked and led down an endless stairwell, they reached the bottom. A grand cave opened up before them. Water dripped from stalactites into a glowing pool of spiraling water, a whirlpool. And there, at its center, there was a woman, red-haired and sturdily built, but now dangling helplessly as a captive within the roaring water. Naruto felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of the cave. Even though he had never met her before, he recognized what she was at once. A Jinchuriki. "Two halves make a whole," said Ashina. "The reason why the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails has always been in Uzumaki, the reason why the whirlpool was once destroyed, they are one and the same." "The whirlpool has a Jinchuriki," breathed Naruto. Taking in the sight of the captive Jinchuriki, goosebumps began to rise on his arms. Like the churning water around them, his chakra surged beneath his skin, as if demanding to be freed. "Which one is she?" Ashina's gaze was solemn. "She is an Uzumaki, just like you, Naruto. And she, too, is the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails." Chapter 48. A Promise That Doesn't Need Words. It was always a big day when the skies split open and somebody came to the island. And according to the rumors, it wasn't just one newcomer this time, but two. These rumors came courtesy of their village's biggest self-proclaimed prankster, Sagara, who came running into the overgrown grove that served as their hideout. "Where are they from? How long are they here for?" demanded Harisa, who always asked the questions nobody else could. She was also the only person their age who could eat a fistful of habaneros without flinching. Sagara waggled his dark eyebrows. "I'm not sure where they came from, but I think they're ninja. They look strong." It was almost as an afterthought that he turned to the girl who'd been braiding Harisa's long hair. "Oh, and your brother's back, too." In a flash, Inada shot up to her feet. "Finally!" A short run to the hilltop revealed a large crowd gathering in the distance at the harbor, confirming Sagara's report. From their hideout, the pathway down into the village was dimly lit, but they ran sure-footed down to the docks, each bend of the trail as familiar to them as the backs of their hands. On the horizon, the gate in the sky splintered before fading away, leaving only clouds in its wake. The hidden whirlpool's greatest line of defense, the sealed gate, was the only way to enter or leave the island, and since the time of its inception, it had never once been breached. As they drew closer, more details came into view. A transporter that hadn't been there the previous day was now docked beside Old Man Tosa's fishing boat, and all the elders had come out to greet the newcomers. At their forefront was Inada's father, who was droning on in his usual speech to outsiders. Inada had just caught sight of the two strange figures standing in front of the crowd when she sensed someone approaching her. Lips snaking back in a grin, she turned around just as a pair of hands reached out to her. "Yashima, you won't be able to sneak up on me anymore." Her older brother grinned back at her. "Who'd ever need to sneak up on a genin like you?" Dodging her retaliatory jab, he added, "How's everyone been?" He seemed about an inch taller than when she'd last seen him, but otherwise he was exactly the same. "Same as always," she shrugged. "And I hope you don't bring back any nasty habits again." The last time Yashima had returned to the village, he tried to show off by smoking cigarettes like some of the older ninja. Of course, Inada had nipped that in the bud with some choicely placed pinches. Leaning to the side, she peered around her brother. "So who are the newcomers? Are they here for long?" Inada trailed off as she took a closer look at the two strangers. Despite the warmth of the day, she felt a slight chill nip at the back of her neck, and thought she had never seen anyone so intimidating before. Yashima tugged her by the hand. "There's some important people from the Hidden Leaf who want to talk to Father about some business. More importantly, I brought something back from the mainland for you. Wanna guess what it is?" Tearing her eyes away from the visitors, Inada grimaced. "Not another tanto." "I'll take it if you don't want it," a teasing voice came from behind them. Yashima immediately flushed, and Inada whirled around to see another red-haired girl smiling at them. Inada's lips pulled back in an identical grin. "Oh, and what would you do with a tanto? Slice up some fruit for dessert, Kushina?" Hands on her hips, Kushina stuck out her tongue. "I can fight too, you know." Inada and Yashima looked at each other before breaking out into laughter as their father droned on in the background. "We welcome our friends from the outside as our honorary guests." They weren't sisters, but they might as well have been. Both red-haired and perpetually armed with a mischievous laugh, there was hardly a moment when they weren't together. The longest they'd ever been apart since their birth was the singular month that Inada had been alive longer than Kushina, and she never let her forget it, either. But, of course, there were some differences. While they were both Uzumaki, Kushina was an orphan, and Inada was the daughter of the chieftain. Though none of that mattered much to Inada, the rest of the village seemed to care, especially on certain ceremonial days when Inada and her family were seated at the forefront of the village center while Kushina was placed far away in the back by herself. "Yashima just has to marry you, and then you'll be up here with the rest of us," Inada once said, half teasing, half serious. Yashima spluttered in response, but didn't fully refute it. "I don't mind sitting by myself, you know," said Kushina. "What if you get in trouble for being back here?" Ignoring her, Inada pointed at the stage. "Look, look! It's starting!" A traditional performance of flames and water played out on the distant stage. Dancers and torchbearers gathered in a circle, and from their midst a massive ball of fire burst up, blotting out the sky. Gasps and a lone scream broke out from the audience suddenly. The fire went out, leaving in its wake darkness and a stunned silence. The only thing visible was the moon, hanging bright and white in the night sky over the stage. A guest to the village must have been present, because someone behind them whispered what every child of Whirlpool already knew: the ceremony of the setting sun. For only in the absence of the sun can the moon fully shine. The first few days after the mysterious strangers from the Hidden Leaf arrived in their village, nothing was particularly out of the ordinary. The buzz around their guests had already started to subside, and the humdrum of daily life marched on. For Inada, that meant another day of being a disappointment to her elders. "That's enough!" shouted Taijutsu, her Jonin instructor. Inada's sparring opponent, who'd been holding a kunai to her neck, released her. As Inada ruefully rubbed her chafed skin, Taijutsu shook her head. "Why is it that you never improve?" she said, eyes flashing in disapproval. It was the same look Inada's father gave her every time he saw her academy results, and though the sting of it had never truly faded, Inada was able to quickly brush it off as she rushed towards the riverbank. It was a hot summer's day, a perfect afternoon for rowing boats along the river that coursed noisily past their hideout. While Inada had never had any talent for fighting, when it came to rowing, she was one of the best in the village, and could maneuver her way across even the most sudden of whirlpools. Yashima, on the other hand, could barely navigate his way out of a pond. "What's the point?" he complained from behind. I'm not a fisherman, I'm a ninja. I can just walk across the water. Inada clicked her tongue, already annoyed at having to wait for him. Not across a whirlpool, you can't. Why am I even here? Yashima continued to complain, his voice carrying across the water. I know you two don't care, but I should be training right now. Before Inada could retort that he was welcome to stop slowing them down, Kushina suddenly chimed in, wonder what it's like to be a ninja. Brows shooting up, Inada stopped rowing and whirled around. What are you talking about, Kushi? The look on her friend's face brought her to a halt as she remembered. As an orphan of a minor branch of the Uzumaki, Kushina had never been sponsored to enter the Shinobi Academy, nor was she allowed to learn any of their clan's signature techniques. Inada's father maintained that it was an ironclad rule held throughout generations to prevent their clan secrets from ever getting out. For a while, the only sounds were the creaking of their paddles and the lapping of water. Eventually, Yashima spoke up, it's tough being a ninja. The training is grueling and you never know when you'll be fighting for your life. Trailing off, he looked furtively towards Inada for backup, but she leaned down instead, pretending to remove some detritus from her paddle. For their every similarity, this was the one difference that always reminded Inada that they weren't the same person, after all. Kushina actually wanted to be a ninja. Whereas Inada, she thought that she would be quite content spending her days just rowing a boat and fishing. Suddenly, cold water splashed her in the face. Spluttering, Inada looked up to see Kushina smiling at her. Hey, what are you getting all quiet for? I was just saying, you know. Inada swallowed. I'll ask father to make an exception for you, she said at last. You definitely have what it takes when it comes to chakra reserves. You have more than me. So there's no reason why you can't try. Mused Kushina. All of a sudden, she picked up her paddle and began to row furiously. The last one back to the shore has to eat a habanero. What? Yashima yelped. Against her will, Inada's lips twitched, and she picked up her paddle as well. See you on the other side. It was soon after that incident that the reason behind Kushina's seemingly empty words made itself known. Inada, Raiza hissed. Did you hear the news? It took a full minute for Inada to process what she said next, and then another minute of walking back and forth before she finally rushed down to the village. The chieftain was sitting with the rest of the council, a bunch of boring, rigid old people, when Inada burst into the meeting room. Father! You can't be serious! Steely brows furrowing, he thundered to his feet. What is the meaning of this? While his raised voice would have usually sent Inada backing away, this time she didn't flinch. Kushina can't go to the Leaf Village. This is her home, you can't force her. Send someone who actually wants to go. Suddenly, her head jerked back. Inada's eyes widened and she touched her cheek, already stinging from the blow. Her father lowered his hand. You manage to disappoint me in new ways every day, he said coldly. But it seems like that girl isn't quite as weak. When given the choice to serve the clan, she agreed. The following days passed in another blur, and then, suddenly, the morning of the stranger's departure had arrived. A crowd was gathered at the harbor once again, and amidst the sea of faces, it was difficult to make out anyone. Standing at the hilltop, Inada watched from afar, her jaw set. Aren't you going to say goodbye? Said Yashima, from beside her. He was a part of the escort taking Kushina to the mainland, but had come looking for Inada before they left. What would I say? She asked, to which he had no response. Well, I am, said a voice, startling the two of them. They spun around to see Kushina sling back a travel bag half her size. You need to train more, you know, if you couldn't hear me coming up. Marching up to them, Kushina quivered and then, turning to Inada, she let out a quick exhale. I won't apologize. But I'll write to you. Me too, Inada replied, all her anger melting away instantly. We'll write to each other. A lump rising in the back of her throat, she reached out with her hand. And I'll visit as soon as I can. Her lips trembling, Kushina immediately stepped forward and took her hand. They stood there in silence for a few moments. They hadn't been apart since the 1 month that separated their births. And then Kushina stepped back. I'll see you on the other side, she said, lips quivering back into a grin. With that, they left. At the foot of the hill, Yashima looked back at Inada, but Kushina did not. Back straight and shoulders set, she soon disappeared into the crowd, and not long afterwards, Enada watched the ship leave the harbor. Down at the docks, the gate ceremony had begun. Seal masters stood at different points on a large sigil drawn in the sand. A drum pounded, and the crowd began to chant the Song of the Sea. It was a song taught to every child in the village, and despite her mood, Enada began to hum along. On the ship, she knew that Kushina would be following along as well, and somehow, the thought gave her some comfort. Following the rhythm now pulsating in the air, the seal masters moved in an intricate pattern around the seal. In response, with a great screeching sound, the sky split open and formed a small gateway, just large enough for a single ship. Bobbing gently in the distance, the ship slipped through the crack and then, it was gone. At last, Enada felt hot tears well up in her eyes. Her mouth opened to call out. Boom! The ground rocked violently below her feet, and she instinctively reached for her tanto before she realized that something in the horizon had exploded. In an instant, large, dark cracks fanned out from the gateway and spidered across the clouds. Enada watched in horror as the blue skies began to churn, bleeding a bright red, and in a thundering shriek, the world shattered. Gigantic shards began to fall down around the village, and in their reflection, she could see a number of dark ships surging onto their shore. It should have been impossible, but for the first time ever, the sealed gate had been breached. Kushina! Enada cried. Yashima! Racing down the hill, she headed for the harbor, where mayhem had broken out. Numerous foreign ninja poured onto the beach, all wearing the forehead protectors of different villages. Cloud, mist, sand, lightning, and more that Enada couldn't even remember. Was the rest of the world attacking their village? But why? And how? In a flash, she thought of the two strangers from the hidden leaf that had just visited their home. One of them, in particular, had stood out to her. A stern man with bandages wrapped across his face. Blood ran indistinguishable from water along the shore, and the furious sound of metal on metal nearly drowned out the screaming. In the thick of it all, Enada saw her father engaged in a fierce fight with a sand puppeteer. His summons, the great fox Kuzunoha, roared beside him, swatting aside a wave of puppets with its massive tail. But Enada could already tell that they were going to be overrun. There were just too many of them. A civilian with long red hair was laying face down in the sand. Enada knew it couldn't be Kushina, but with a pounding heart, she raced forward and reached out to turn her over. Are you okay? She broke off with a start as she realized that the body's face was gone. The leaf has betrayed us, said a low voice behind Enada, who jumped to her feet. It was a strange man she had occasionally seen at ceremonies and council meetings with her father. He wasn't old or particularly frail, and yet his face had always given her the impression of skin stretched taut over a skull. That's impossible, she replied in a faltering voice. They've always been our allies. Even as she spoke, she knew there was no other way the gate could have been breached. But if the leaf had betrayed the whirlpool, that meant that Kushina and Yashima were now in the hands of their enemies, which was a possibility that Enada couldn't accept. I'd always told your father that you are too weak to carry this burden after me, the man rasped. I am sorry, child. What are you? But the man had already raced ahead, the metal of his forehead protector flashing darkly. As he approached the beach at an impossible speed, a number of tails suddenly erupted behind him. They were different from that of her father's summons. These were tails made of pure chakra. The man let out a deep, guttural roar that shook the ground once more, and in response, a rallying cry swept across the whirlpool forces. Enada clenched a trembling fist tightly around her tanto's handle. This was no time to be scared. She had to help protect the civilians. She had to protect the village. She had to see Kushina and Yashima again. Suddenly, she felt her trembling come to a stop, and she knew that she could fight. How much time had passed? Caught in the haze of battle, Enada could no longer tell. It could have been several hours or several days. Whenever it looked like they had defeated all the invaders, even more reinforcements flooded in through the broken gate. How many people had she killed? Her hands that had been weaving hair only a few days ago were now stained in blood. The only thing that hadn't changed was the bright red color that ran thick across her fingers. It was strange. All the hesitation she had felt before in her training had disappeared. It was as though every lesson ever drilled into Enada now manifested itself into each move she made. She knew exactly when to dodge, and at what precise angle to thrust out with her tanto. She found that the gap in combat experience between her and the enemy could be bridged with her sheer quantity of chakra, and one after another, her opponents dropped to the ground before her. But the numbers she faced paled in comparison to the seemingly endless stream of enemies encountered by her father and the strange man. Standing back to back, chakra tails and tanto blades spun in a deadly dance. With every roar of the two foxes, the splinter in the sky seemed to grow just a little more faint. Enada parried a heavy blow from a Miss Nin, who let out a frustrated cry. Suddenly jumping back, he began to sprint towards her father with lightning chakra crackling along his kanai. Rapidly going through the seals, Enada threw out her hands. Sway Tun, Sway Ben, Water Release, Water Whip. Multiple tendrils of water shot out towards the Miss Nin. Wrapping around his ankles, they dragged him back through the air to Enada, and before he could pull free, she plunged her tanto into his neck. He stiffened in shock, and stilled. And then the battlefield was quiet. The remaining enemies had retreated, and in the far distance, the last of the splintering in the sky faded away. The gate had finally been closed. The last of her strength slipping away, Enada staggered. Her head drooped down, and she was faintly surprised to see a blade protruding out of her stomach. She looked back up to meet her father's astonished expression. "Am I still a disappointment to you, father?" Unable to even muster the words out loud, Enada crumpled to the ground, and everything faded away. When Enada woke, it was a burning agony in her belly. The pain was so intense, her cry caught in her throat, and her eyes rolled back. In that brief moment of silence, she couldn't see anything, but disembodied voices rang out. "I will take. There is no time, only she can." Every syllable was another stab in the wound, as she managed to croak out, "What's happening?" But instead of responding, a white-clothed medic Nin swooped down, and before she could protest, injected something into Enada's arm. The sharp pain burned like liquid fire and her cry finally escaped her, but everything turned dark. When Enada next woke, the jumble of pain and sensations had largely abated. She was in a private room by herself. There were no windows, and though she couldn't tell the time of day, judging from the dullness of the pain in her stomach, several days must have passed since the battle. Just as Enada staggered to her feet, the door opened to reveal her father. "Father!" she cried out, relieved. "What in the world is going?" She faltered at the look in his eyes. Their father had been elderly even when Enada and Yashima had been children. However, due to the sheer strength of their bloodline, he had always brimmed with life force and energy. It was only now that, for the first time, she saw the toll of his years reflected in his haggard face. "Tenna is on the verge of death," he said hollowly. "If he passes without passing it on, the Nine Tails will return to the wilderness. The gate will collapse, and the village will fall to our enemies." "The Nine Tails?" Enada didn't understand. "The yin and yang can only be simultaneously held by an Uzumaki," her father continued, ignoring her. In fact, Enada wasn't sure whether her father had even heard her. With Yashima gone, the only one left, the only choice left, he took a step towards Enada, who instinctively backed away. She didn't know what he was talking about, but while she was used to his disapproval, his expression right now was different. It was almost indifference. "Is you?" After a long period of nothingness, Enada suddenly realized she had been given bodily form once more. She was floating in a pitch-black world. There was nothing around her, above her, or below her. But somehow she was there. She felt weak and tired, and even though she had just awakened, she wanted nothing more than to go back to sleep. With a jolt, she realized that it was eerily quiet where she was. Hadn't she been fighting for her life on a battlefield? Where was everyone? Somehow, it simultaneously felt like it had happened mere moments ago, and also decades ago. "Kushina?" Enada called out softly, taking a step forward. Despite there being nothing there, her foot held in the darkness, so she took another step forward. "Yashima?" No one responded. No one had ever responded. And yet, Enada knew she wasn't alone. Something was approaching her in the darkness, a presence that silently burned, drawing closer to her with a fire as hot as the sun. "Kushina?" Enada echoed weakly. It wasn't her, she could tell that, at least. But strange as it was, something about it reminded her of Kushina. It wasn't just Inada who felt that connection. The darkness enshrouding her something monstrous stirred at its approach. Slowly Inada raised her hand. Chapter 49, Moonlight Talk. She is an Uzumaki, just like you, Naruto. And she, too, is the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Though Naruto did not respond outwardly to the revelation, he would not give Ashina that satisfaction in his mind. He immediately reeled. He would be lying if he said that his first thought was not whether this bound woman in front of them was, in fact, his mother. He had been lied to his entire life. What was another lie? The woman appeared around the correct age. And even if they did not look particularly alike, perhaps there was a reason he'd always only been compared to his father despite his coloring. However, Ashina's next words quickly put that alarming deduction to rest. Her name is Inada. She is my daughter, and your mother Kushina was a dear friend of hers. So in the end, a stranger. And yet something about her seemed oddly nostalgic, as though he had once known her long ago. Easing back the tension in his shoulders, Naruto took a step forward to better regard the woman's face. You said she is the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. How can that be the case, if I am the current host? Ashina seemed bemused. Despite having never known your parents, you don't bear interest in them. While it was a statement, and not a question, it held a note of consternation that told Naruto that whatever information they may have gathered on him had not been as comprehensive as gauged. It was also the nth time Naruto had heard this same observation, and he decided to allow some annoyance to tinge his next words. What about yourself? You don't seem to bear much concern for your own captive daughter. This did not evoke much reaction from the older man, who replied evenly, she fulfilled her duties as a daughter. As a father, I could not be any prouder. He raised an eyebrow. I must say, you are quite different from your mother. From his tone, it was unclear whether he considered this a point in Naruto's detriment. Naruto refocused his gaze on the limp woman. Unlike the people of Whirlpool he had seen on the shore, her face was pale, nearly translucent. How long has this hapless woman been bound here? And for what reason? Is there a point to this meandering? He asked. Ashina made a sound as if to bookmark the matter for another time. The Nine Tails is the most powerful tailed beast of the nine. Your average shinobi would be torn apart by the sheer quantity of chakra, not to mention the colossal effort it would take to seal the Nine Tails to begin with. It would require the effort of multiple seal masters. So how could it have been sealed into the body of a mere newborn by a lone man on that night of chaos and destruction? Naruto wasn't sure what he'd been expecting, but the older man's direct candor was surprising. I was told that there were unfamiliar aspects to the seal placed on me. For the first time, Ashina smiled. While on others, it would have brightened their expression, for Ashina, it only accentuated his aging wrinkles. Indeed, before their insidious betrayal, the Hidden Leaf was once in alliance with the Hidden Whirlpool. We shared our secrets as if we were family. No, we were family. Even now, the blood of our people flows through the descendants of the first Hokage. Of those many secrets, the one that truly bound us together as allies was also what ultimately drove us apart. Mito knew it would require substantial effort to seal and control the beast as it was. Furthermore, she was aware of the political imbalance that would result if she, as a representative of the Hidden Whirlpool, were to take this power solely for the leaf on behalf of the first Hokage. And so, she split the beast into two yin and yang. The yang, the sun, was sealed inside of her, and she became the leaf's first Jinchuriki. The yin, the moon, was given to the whirlpool and sealed inside her younger brother. In other words, you inherited the yang of the Nine Tails through your mother, while my daughter inherited the yin. The tailed beast inside of him was incomplete. Naruto stilled, stunned by the revelation. Jiraiya had only implied that there was a key to weaken Naruto's seal was the reason why Ashina's daughter felt strangely familiar to him because she hosted the other half of the Nine Tails. Suddenly, taking in again the woman's eerily pallid face, Naruto had to swallow back a hint of bile. So even all the way out here, Jinchuriki were treated as nothing more than tools. She's the one powering the gate separating this village from the rest of the world, Naruto realized aloud. She's the source of energy keeping this village alive. The nature of the seal behind the gate requires a constant and immense current of chakra, which necessitated my daughter's immobility. An interesting choice of words for a man holding his own child hostage. And, turning back at Ashina, Naruto's lips curved down grimly. What is it you want from me? You needed a backup? Ashina barked out in a humorless laugh. I would hardly have brought you straight to the heart of my village if I had such sinister intentions for you. No, I need an ally. It is time the rest of the world came to know that we have persisted, but to protect what we have rebuilt from ashes, we will need more strength. A pointed pause. Your strength. Strength? Naruto had to wonder, was he referring to Naruto himself, or to the tailed beast sealed within him? Or did he, like many others, consider them one and the same? And what do I get in return? Said Naruto, knowing full well he was walking into a trap. Ashina's eyes gleamed, a predator pouncing on its prey. I offer you what you seek, the way to control and utilize the Nine Tails. And I also offer you what you need to make your Nine Tails whole. He stepped forward, hand outreached towards his daughter's pallid face as though to cradle it. However, stopping just short of making contact, he lowered his hand. Think it over. I'll have your answer by nightfall. He left without ceremony, footsteps fading into the silence that followed. Naruto stood alone in the stillness, facing the woman who hadn't stirred, hadn't spoken. Her breathing was so shallow, he might have missed it entirely if not for the faint rise and fall of her chest. She was not his mother, and he could have lived the rest of his life without knowing her. But there was something that drew him to her, and he suddenly knew that it wasn't because of the Nine Tails. He wanted to help her. It took only a few seconds outside for Karen to realize what felt so strange about the island in daytime. The sun was gone. In its place, the moon shone unnaturally bright in the sky. It must have had something to do with the barrier around the island, but it was a poor replacement for the sun. While the land was awash in light, it was a far cry from the warmth and color and feel of real sunlight. The attendant who was escorting Karen seemed to misinterpret her aghast expression. Oh yes. Isn't she beautiful? Where's the sun? The attendant beamed. There is no need for the sun here, as we are under the protection of the moon. Her light is ever present. At the note of fervor in her voice, Karen took a closer look at the attendant. She was perhaps a few years older than Karen, with long, thick red hair. Her hands were soft and unworn, but the marked crease lines around her pale eyes reminded Karen of herself when she'd been under Zosui's control. Right this way, Miss Karen. We're almost there. The attendant ushered Karen with Naruto's clones silently following along from a distance towards a roofless structure just outside of a forest. As they approached the entryway, Karen could see inside metal goblets and assortments of flowers lying around a large stone carving of a stately woman. A sweet, thick scent filled the air. Clearly, they were some sort of offerings, but who was the object of their fervor? Lady Inada, the attendant explained, this time correctly gauging her question. The current incarnation of the moon, and our island's guardian. Karen lingered at the shrine longer than she'd intended, drawn in by the arrangement of the offerings, the subtle intricacies that spoke of old traditions, silver threads woven into the flower stems, and water bowls filled just to the rim and left undisturbed. The attendant had called it the rite of sustained light, a custom meant to honor the guardian moon and keep her gaze benevolent. The name and notion sounded ridiculous even in her head, but her feet stayed rooted. Her mother had once spoken of such customs, though only in passing and always with a kind of distant ache. Karen recalled sitting on the floor as her mother painted patterns on woven grass with a brush too fine for her bitten fingers. For Karen, the patterns had been meaningless symbols, and nothing more, for her mother had never explained the meaning behind them. By then, she must have already known they'd never go back. Karen let out a slow breath. She had thought that if she ever came to Whirlpool, she would feel something click into place. A sense of return. Of belonging. But the longer she stood beneath that unblinking moonlight, the more certain she became. This wasn't the home she'd imagined. It was too still. Too reverent. Like a dream of a place, rather than the place itself. Still, there was something about it that made her feel small in a not entirely unpleasant way, like a thread being woven into something much older than her. Eventually, she turned from the shrine, her footsteps light on the stone path as she made her way back toward the main grounds. She didn't have to wonder long. When Naruto had gone soon after she returned, Karen saw him emerge from the restricted area. Despite the fact that she couldn't use her sensory abilities here, she immediately sensed his perturbation. It could have been an indication of her increasing familiarity with Naruto, but it was more a testimony to how much the lid on his emotions had been disturbed since their arrival to the island. Or rather, the changes that she had begun to see in Naruto since their escape from the hidden leaf had started to find bearing. It wasn't that the stoic, emotionless ninja she knew was no longer there. If anyone else had seen Naruto at that moment, they would have been unable to decipher his expression. But there was something about him that felt raw, exposed. Besides her, Naruto's clone stilled, perhaps sensing the main body's turmoil. Before she could stop herself, Karen hurried to meet him. "Naruto, are you okay?" Naruto reached out with a hand, and the clone disappeared in a wisp of smoke. "Why wouldn't I be?" he replied evasively. Even as he processed the new memories, his gaze remained focused. "They didn't try to take you anywhere?" While it was a transparent effort to divert the topic, Karen followed along. "They've just been feeding me all day. Maybe they're trying to fatten me up for slaughter." Suddenly, Naruto's sharp gaze regarded her in a way that made Karen's ears burn hot, and her arms itched to wrap around her scrawny self, and then, he smiled. While there was no humor in it, it softened his gaze. "That would be quite the Herculean effort," he said simply. Karen blinked, not quite sure whether to take offense, before deflating. It was apparent that Naruto would not be sharing with her the details of his conversation with the chieftain. But Karen didn't mind too much, or so she tried to tell herself. She'd long since decided she would be patient and earn all of his trust over time. Nightfall in a land that had no sun came gradually. Overhead, dark clouds brimmed like waves around the moon. The light itself did not fade, but the sky dimmed, a quiet shift rather than a dramatic change. The wind stilled. Down in the village, flames began to flicker on. Ripping the skin of his thumb, Naruto slammed his hand down into the ground. Kuchio's no jutsu, summoning technique. In a burst of smoke, a large red fox appeared before him. Before Naruto could say anything, he turned an indignant snout up into the air. "Humph. It's been so long, I was getting ready to dissolve our contract. It's been hardly a few weeks since I last summoned you." "Has it?" Amakuro flicked his tail irritably. "So why does it feel so much longer?" Naruto had no response for that. Instead, he settled into a kneel, centering his chakra as Amakuro loomed before him, almost more spectral than solid beneath the cold light of the moon. He exhaled, focusing inward. He could feel it, the stir of wild, volatile chakra curling at the edge of his awareness. The Ninetales essence. Familiar, but still resistant. Still separate. When he reached for it, it recoiled. When he tried to command it, it pushed back. The power was there, but like water through cracked stone, it refused to flow cleanly. "You're holding it wrong," Amakuro said, circling him. "You want to force it into shape, but that's not how we move. Fox chakra isn't a blade, it's a ripple." Naruto's brow furrowed as he adjusted, but the result was the same, chakra that flared bright for a moment before collapsing in on itself. He gritted his teeth. "It's still unstable." Amakuro sat heavily beside him. "That's because your control over the Ninetales chakra is." Naruto didn't answer. The words stung, mostly because they were true, and partly because of the revelations earlier in the day. But here Amakuro lifted his snout to the moon. "The seal around this island, it's almost like it was built with our kind in mind. I've never felt closer to the moon." Naruto followed his gaze skyward. The moon hovered impossibly large, close enough it felt like it might fall. "Why the moon?" he asked, not really expecting an answer. Amakuro's tail twitched. "Because it sees everything, even what the sun won't. That's why they fear it." He was silent for a moment before adding, "That's why I'm the only one left." Naruto turned to him. "Hunted," the fox continued, voice low. "One by one. Because of what people believed we were." Naruto had suspected as much, given the amount of vitriol he'd received over the years for his own coloring, but he hadn't expected Amakuro to voluntarily offer the information himself. The weight of Amakuro's words settled over them both. "I hoped I'd find something different here," Naruto admitted after a long silence. "Something different from the hidden leaf. And I did. But..." "You don't belong here," Amakuro said bluntly. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of seawater and old incense. Before Naruto could answer, a new presence slipped quietly into the clearing. Ashina. The older man's presence didn't announce itself, it pressed in, like a tide quietly reclaiming land. Your control of the sage mode is impressive for your age. But you still carry doubt like an open wound. Amakuro chuffed beside him. Naruto rose to his feet, the chakra settling reluctantly beneath his skin. Maybe that's the price of being a Jinchuriki, he said. Ashina tilted his head. No. That's the price of being human. Naruto studied Ashina's expression, searching for something concrete, some crack in that ever-composed facade. But the older man's gaze remained unreadable. Serene, as if he already knew how the conversation would end. Ashina stepped into the moonlit clearing, stopping beside a weathered boulder partially sunken into the grass. He brushed a finger across the smooth, beaten surface, the gesture almost reverent. Our people have always walked a path apart, even in the days before the great nations arose. We were never conquerors. Ours was a different kind of strength. The strength to endure, to preserve. Naruto said nothing, and Ashina continued, his voice like low tide, as he held a withered finger up at the sky. The moon does not demand power. Only balance. The moonlight was steady, unwavering. Cold, but not cruel. Ashina circled once, sandals quiet on the worn earth. You inherited the yang. The brute force, the untempered instinct. Without discipline, it burns through you. He stopped, studying Naruto's profile. You're stronger than most, but not whole. That imbalance, it'll kill you before our enemies ever do. Naruto finally spoke. Our enemies? Yes, Ashina's face was like stone. Our enemies, the hidden villages that seek the complete destruction of my people. And in return you will lend us your strength, for a future where my people don't live one tremor away from collapse. His gaze shifted to the moon, before returning to Naruto. You will restore the balance to anchor this land. He gestured around them. My village survives on borrowed breath. My daughter, there was a hitch, subtle but sharp, in his voice. She has held up the walls of this seal longer than anyone should have. So I will train you until you are able to control the whole nine tails. Naruto stared at him. What happens when I'm ready? Will your daughter not die from the extraction? Ashina shook his head. As Uzumaki, our vitality and chakra reserve allows us the unique capability to survive the process. He turned, already stepping away. At first light, find me at the Temple of Remembrance. We begin then. And just like that, he was gone, his footsteps fading into the trees. Naruto stood alone in the clearing, Amakuro silent beside him. He didn't like the way Ashina had spoken, like he was already part of something he hadn't agreed to. Like he was already dancing in the palm of his hand, like any choice he had in the matter had been an illusion to begin with. But there were too many lives weighing on him. Naruto looked up at the sky, not at the moon, not at the clouds, not at anything in particular. He could feel the absence of the Tonto he had lost when entering the island now more than ever. Our enemies, the hidden villages that seek the complete destruction of my people. According to Ashina, their enemies were the rest of the shinobi world. Naruto wasn't so sure. He had seen shinobi wear many faces, those who smiled while lying, those who preached peace while sharpening blades. He had once believed his enemies were the ones who shunned him, the ones who pulled him strings like a puppet, the ones who held a blade against the people he cared about. And yet, had Naruto himself not been their enemy? Whether the reason seemed valid or not, had he not killed those they cared about? Who is your enemy? He didn't yet have a name for it, because it didn't seem as simple as it once had. But he would. Because if he couldn't name it, he couldn't fight it. And if he couldn't fight it, then he'd be just another weapon traded between wars, like Ashina's daughter, and like every Jinchuriki who came before them. His jaw tightened. Somewhere in the trees, a night bird called once, then fell silent. I'll play your game for now, Naruto muttered under his breath. But I'll choose the ending. Chapter 50, Crimson Spiral and Black Thunder. The stillness of Whirlpool had stopped unnerving him. In the beginning, Naruto had been perturbed by the silence, how it hung in the air like a hell breath, how the moon never shifted from its place in the sky. But after a week of training under its gaze, he had grown accustomed to its presence. If anything, it had become familiar and predictable. Unlike Ashina. Naruto exhaled through his nose and dropped back into a kneel, sweat running down the back of his neck. Ashina stood a few feet away, arms crossed behind his back, his expression etched in granite. "You're still forcing it," the older man said. "Your chakra flares with impatience." "I'm trying to balance it." "Trying is not doing," Ashina cut in with a sharp wave of his hand. "You cannot balance what you do not possess. It must be cultivated. It is not seared into you like the yang." Naruto ground his teeth together. His entire body ached from the prolonged stillness. Every day, if it could even be called that, the same, meditate beneath the unmoving moon, waiting for the precise, unspeakable moment when his seething chakra quiets, harmonizing with the lulling energy of his surroundings. It was as impossible as it sounded. Ashina stepped into the moonlight, the white of his long hair glinting like drawn steel. All ninjutsu are formed through the transformation of yin and yang. Yin is imagination, formless potential. Yang is vitality, force, and substance. Together, they mold chakra into what you call technique. He formed a seal. A flame blinked into existence, bright as any Naruto had seen yet without heat. An illusion. "You think I don't know this?" Naruto muttered. "I think you've forgotten. Or never truly understood." Ashina's gaze cut sharper. "You are a vessel filled with flame, Naruto. But all you've ever done is burn. Now you must learn to shape the smoke." The words echoed, unsettling. Biting back his irritation, Naruto dropped his gaze. He inhaled. Exhaled. Again and again, pushing his chakra inward, away from skin and muscle, toward the hollow center of himself. Seeking stillness. Karen had never been particularly good with her hands. Her strength had always lain in sensing, in precision, in analysis, not the fine motor control required for things like taijutsu or kenjutsu. Or for that matter, weaving. But here, in Whirlpool, no one seemed to care. After a few days of watching Karen grow increasingly listless while Naruto trained, her attendant brought her to a workroom fragrant with dried herbs and alive with the soft clack of tools. There, another woman handed her a lapful of yarn and gestured to the loom. After a brief demonstration, she simply said, "Feel the pattern, not think it." And to Karen's surprise, she didn't hate it. In the quiet of the workroom, the women wove seals into yarn, flowing spirals and interlocking crescents, each thread imbued with intention, protection, resilience. Beautiful, yes, but also powerful. So Karen tried her hand at it. Her fingers fumbled often, and the dyes pricked at her skin, but after several weeks, she'd managed to make a little red cloth with a white spiral at its center. When one of the other girls caught her tracing the spiral at the center of the cloth, Karen shoved it behind her so quickly the threads nearly tore. "It's just practice," she mumbled, cheeks warm. The girl didn't press, but she smiled. Later that day, while tying off the last knot on a new pattern, Karen let her attention drift and spoke without thinking. "Weaving feels like the way I control my chains." The clacking around her stopped. The room stilled. The attendant nearest her, the same woman who had guided her to the moon shrine, looked up sharply. "Chains? You can summon the sealing chains?" Karen blinked. "Why, yeah. I mean, I can't use them very often. Only when I really concentrate, or when something's dangerous." The attendant rose without another word and left the room. Not long after, an older woman entered. The other women straightened as she passed, but no one spoke. She moved slowly, and with purpose. Every step was measured, as though weaving her path across the hair was a silver waterfall down her back, bound in scarlet threads. Karen recognized her immediately. She was the woman who had warmly welcomed her at the gate. Her name was Zuki, and she was the wife of the chieftain, Ashina. She smiled now as she had at the harbor, but there was something different in it, less ceremonial, more searching. "I'm told that you can summon the chains," said Zuki. "Do you know what they are?" Karen hesitated. "They're just chakra chains. Like wire, but stronger." Zuki raised a brow. "So you don't know?" "I've never had anyone teach me," Karen said, defensive despite herself. "And the seals you've been weaving here?" "I just copy them," Karen admitted. I understand the flow of the chakra, but I don't know what each one means. Not really. Suki's smile didn't fade, but the ends of it twitched as if in rebuke. So your mother passed on nothing. Karen flushed, and suddenly thought of the carved necklace her mother had once worn. Come to my house tomorrow morning. For what? Karen asked, trying to keep the bite out of her voice. Suki's gaze lingered. To teach you what you've inherited. So the next time you reach for your chains, they don't come out wild and blind. Then she turned and left, leaving only the scent of sandalwood and a strange tightness in Karen's chest. Whirlpool never shifted. Not in light, not in air, not in rhythm. Day in, day out, Naruto sat cross-legged on the stone outcropping overlooking the village, bathed in the ever-present moonlight. It no longer felt strange, but it refused to feel comforting. His breaths came slow and controlled. Chakra pooled evenly through his limbs, swirling just beneath the skin in a quiet current. Still, it wasn't enough. Ashina had said it would take time to temper the imbalance of his chakra. Meditating under the moon would align him with the Yin, and if he wanted to control the fox fully, he needed to first control himself. But right now, all it felt like was a stalemate. Naruto opened his eyes and exhaled through his nose. Still feels off. A snort came from nearby. I could have told you that hours ago, said Amakuro, stretching his limbs out in a passable imitation of a snake. You're like a forge that only knows how to burn. Naruto scowled. Then maybe stop watching and actually help. I am helping, Amakuro said with a yawn. My very existence is a sterling example of the balance you so desperately seek. Naruto didn't answer. He just closed his eyes again and tried to focus, but inevitably, his mind began to drift. To the wandering days with Jiraiya, who offered less instruction and more vague encouragement before vanishing to research his next book. To the waning evenings at his apartment, when Kakashi would debate chakra theory with him like it was a game, poking holes at every turn in Naruto's logic. Back then, he'd found them frustrating. Now, he realized they had always been there. Ashina wasn't like either of them. Training with Ashina was like throwing stones at a wall and expecting it to speak. He was exacting, unsparing, and spoke only when there was something to correct. Never praise. Never reassurance. Just silence or cold dismissal. Naruto couldn't decide which was worse, the weight of expectation, or the absence of everything else. He stood with a huff. I'm not getting anywhere. Ashina's voice came sharp from the treeline. Giving up already? Naruto turned. He hadn't sensed him again. Ashina stepped into the clearing, hands clasped behind his back. His gaze passed over Amakuro, who didn't acknowledge him. You have the power and the instincts, Ashina said. But you rely too heavily on intuition, not refinement. Naruto bristled. And sitting under a moon for weeks will fix that? No, Ashina replied flatly. It's merely the first step. He reached into his robe and produced an object of spiraling stone nestled in a black cloth, with an unfamiliar seal carved into its very center. You've been stuck long enough. I hoped we wouldn't need to come to this, but it's time you saw how someone handled the other half of your burden. Naruto eyed the seal warily. What does this do? The imprint seal on this stone carries the memory of the former Jinchuriki of the Yin Nine Tails. If you cannot learn from me, perhaps his memory will succeed where I have failed. Naruto hesitated, his pulse picking up. He didn't like the idea of reaching into someone else's life. But the idea of standing still while the outside world fell apart was even worse. Still, a chill passed through him, not fear, exactly. Just the sense that once he touched it, something would shift. Fine, he said. Let's do it. Ashina held the seal out toward him. Keep your mind open. Don't resist. The stone was cool beneath his hand, smooth and pulsing faintly. As his chakra touched it, the world around him began to dissolve, first the clearing, then the night air, then the sound of Ashina's breathing. Until there was only moonlight. When he was young, Tenno was loud. The kind of loud that filled courtyards, that echoed down training halls and made elders rub their temples. He had friends who dared him to leap from treetops and race through the whirlpools. He had a laugh that cracked like thunder. But in the evening, no matter the ruckus he had raised in the daytime, he always returned dutifully home, to his older sister Mito. She had raised him after their parents died. Not with gentleness, exactly, but with a kind of fierce steadiness. She taught him how to weave seals, how to clean a blade, and how to never show his fear even when his legs trembled. He loved her more than anything in the world. When the alliance was struck with the hidden leaf, and she was chosen to marry the heir to the Senju clan, Mito didn't cry. She simply packed her meager belongings, bound her hair tighter, and told Tenna that this was the path peace demanded. He didn't understand it then. Only that it meant she would leave. So he followed her. He crossed the sea to the land of fire and lived as a ghost behind her shadow, training while she grew into her role as the wife of the first Hokage. And then, as the first Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. She never said it aloud, but Tenna saw it wear on her what the Nine Tails did to her body, how it strained at every opportunity against the seal. How her hands trembled when no one else was looking. And then, one night, Mito called him to her quarters. She was pregnant with her first child, and she was worried how childbirth would weaken the seal. "I've found a solution, Tenna," she said. He said nothing, only listened. He'd grown better at that over the years. "The leaf will keep the young," she said. "You'll take the Een back to Whirlpool. It's safer. It's balanced. You trust me, don't you?" Of course he did. The ceiling burned worse than anything he had imagined. The Een Ninetails did not enter quietly. It came screaming, lashing through his body like a limb torn from something greater. It howled for what it had lost, for the part of itself still nestled inside Mito, across the mountains and sea. Tenna thrashed for days, fevered and disoriented. When he finally emerged from the haze, his sister was gone, and he returned alone to Whirlpool. Over time, the tailed beast inside him stopped raging. Instead, it wept. Its power spilled in low waves, like sorrow turned into chakra, as it ached with a longing for what it had lost. The agony of that absence was more than physical, it was emptiness given form. Like a psalm cut short just before the final note. The elders taught Tenna to meditate, to balance his chakra with rhythm and breath. And somewhere in those long, wordless hours beneath moonlight and stone, the Nine Tails began to talk to him. "Why did you separate me?" the Nine Tails asked him one night, its voice coiling like smoke through his mind. "Because you were too powerful," he answered. "There needed to be balance." "This is not balanced. This is an abomination." "I'm sorry," he said. He did not fight it after that. He meditated. He listened. And in return, the Nine Tails lent him his power. When war came, Tenna became the moon on the battlefield, cold and silent and unstoppable. He felt the Een Nine Tails chakra surge like floodwaters, lifting him to impossible heights. He was not its master. But he was not in the cage. One day, while returning from a mission, he stood by the upper cliffs of the southern shore, overlooking the sea. He was alone, as he usually preferred to be now. The overcast morning was silent, lacking the usual squawking of seabirds, lulled only by the rhythmic pounding of gray waves on the rocks. And then suddenly a crack of laughter, like thunder. In the distance, he saw two small girls in a boat, laughing as they tried to guide it with a makeshift sail, one with bright red hair, the other slightly darker and sharper-eyed. He recognized them, Kushina and Inada. The chieftain had told him that they were to be trained. One would carry the young, the other the Een. In the future they would become vessels of mass destruction. But right now, they looked like joy divided between two hearts. So over the years, he continued to watch them from a distance, these sisters not by blood, but by fate. And every time he saw them together, he felt that quiet old ache rise again. The moonlight didn't fade. It broke. One breath, Naruto was still standing in Tenna's memory, the weight of sorrow clinging to his skin. The next he was ankle-deep in water before a familiar iron gate. Darkness writhed behind the bars. Smoke like chakra twisted through the gloom. Then, a flash of red. A surge of heat. Two bloodshot eyes opened wide, burning. "You're back," the Ninetales growled, voice like grinding stone. Its chakra pressed against the seal, not lashing, not rampaging. Testing. Naruto stood his ground. I didn't come to fight. The beast snarled, claws scraping against the gate. You never do. And yet, every time you come back, you come to take. Naruto let the accusation sit. The seal glowed faintly before him, frayed at the edges. Every use of the Ninetales chakra unraveled it just a bit more. Every breath of borrowed power, one step closer to collapse. I know you didn't choose this. You didn't ask to be split in half. You didn't ask to be sealed in me, or in anyone. The Ninetales didn't respond, but its chakra stilled for a breath. Even so, Naruto went on, you've lent me your strength. Again and again. And I've used it like a weapon. I've used you like a weapon. A growl rumbled from deep within the beast's chest. Naruto stepped closer, steady. So thank you? The growl faltered. Glowing eyes narrowed suspiciously in the darkness. Gratitude? But I'm not like Tenna, Naruto continued. I won't carry your sorrow. I'm not that noble or patient. He stepped forward, close enough now to feel the heat rising from the bars. His chakra flared, not in challenge, but in conviction. So I'm going to keep taking your chakra, he said flatly. Because I need it. People need me to use it. And the world doesn't stop to wait for balance. Silence. Then. Ha! The Ninetales barked a jagged laugh, barbed and bitter. Its tails lashed behind it, sending gusts of wind rippling across the still water. At least you recognize your own hypocrisy. Naruto reached out. His fingers brushed the seal, then he ripped it away. Immediately, a surge of chakra erupted from the cage in a torrent of heat and fury. Roaring in freedom, the Ninetales surged forward, shattering the bars effortlessly as its massive claws slammed down on him. But Naruto didn't flinch. He dropped into a low stance, palms pressed to the rippling surface of the water. His breath caught. His focus narrowed. And he felt it, the pull of his surroundings outside, the hum beneath everything. It didn't roar into him like the Ninetales chakra did. It flowed, weaving itself into the whirls of his chakra network like ripples of wind through flame. Natural energy surged through his limbs. His eyes snapped open, burning, focused. Red markings flared across his face as his vision sharpened, and suddenly he could see every detail. The flicker of chakra along the Ninetales' claws. The microscopic ripping in the old seal. The way its chakra rippled like a tide straining against the moon. The beast's power surged toward him and stopped. Held. Contained. Absorbed. The Ninetales snarled, jaws parting, you dare. I dare, Naruto cut in, voice sharp as a kunai. Because I must. But it wasn't enough. Even now, with natural energy coursing through his body, his senses sharpened to an edge, his will locked tight, the Ninetales still surged forward. This wasn't just a battle of willpower. It was a contest of presence. And Naruto, for all his training, all his victories, all his growth, was still barely a man, standing in front of a force older than nations. The Ninetales roared. Chakra tore through the air, unraveling Naruto's form like paper in a storm. The water beneath him began to boil. His breath hitched. His muscles seized. His feet faltered just for a second. But it was enough. The chakra surged past his control. Flames of red and black exploded outward, wrapping around him. Tails began to form behind him, one, then two, then three, each more violent than the last. His skin burned. His vision wavered. No. And then. A flash of white. A burning seal etched across the air. Naruto collapsed forward, coughing, the chakra torn from his limbs like a ripped shroud. The water around him stilled, and the cage doors snapped shut with a thunderous boom. Standing between him and the gate, one hand pressed against the bars, was Ashina. The newly placed seal fluttered under his fingers, precise, unyielding. No human can stand alone against a tailed beast, Ashina said quietly. Naruto's body trembled. His hands clenched into the water, lungs heaving, shoulders hunched from the weight of it all. I almost had it, he rasped. Ashina didn't move. No, you were overwhelmed by it. Behind the bars, the nine tails glared through narrowed eyes. But it no longer raged. It simply watched, tail flicking lazily, as if amused. Come back when you know who you are, it said. Then we'll see who owns this cage. Chapter 51, Crimson Flames. In the hidden leaf, the alarms that had once rung out in lockdown to warn of a missing Neen had given way to the clang of hammers. With the last of the funerals behind them, the village once again pulsed with life, not with festival cheer, but with the grim rhythm of people clawing their way out of grief. Children too young for the academy hauled planks. Elders stitched tarps with stiff fingers. Shinobi guarded every gate, shoulders tense, eyes sharper than before. No more attacks had come since the invasion, yet the village moved as if expecting the sky to fall again. Kakashi stood at the edge of the training grounds, hands in his pockets, one eye, his only eye, half lidded against the sun. A genin squad stumbled through formation drills among the rubble. Life in the hidden leaf went on because it had to, and behind it all was the new interim Hokage. Danzo's rise had been swift and surgical. The root operatives patrolled the streets openly now, turning every alleyway into a second interrogation room. Though Kakashi had been released from custody, agents still clung to his every step. Perhaps they feared he knew too much. Or worse, too little. The other Jonin didn't speak of it aloud, at least not in the meeting rooms, but the tension was palpable. Might Guy was starting to grow red-faced from the strain of holding himself back every time one of the root operatives gave him an order. And Asuma, well, nobody was going near him, not ever since the loss of the Lord Third and his student, Ino. Then there was Sasuke. He moved through the village like a ghost, returning each day from Danzo's private training hall a little more battered around the edges. True to form, Sasuke didn't look Kakashi's way. More than once, he had thought of intervening, but Sasuke wasn't breaking, at least, not yet. And as long as he remained in the village, he was still within reach. Still. Kakashi turned his gaze to the Hokage rock. Sunlight caught the etchings on the stone faces, and for a moment, he wondered at how things had changed in the matter of weeks. His right eye throbbed faintly. Though Kakashi didn't exactly miss the Sharingan, he could feel its absence acutely. I'll be taking this back. That was what the masked ninja had said. It didn't make sense. His old teammate, Obito, had definitely died. And yet the phantom who'd taken the Sharingan couldn't have been anyone else. A gift once given in the throes of death had been reclaimed two halves, returned to a whole. So how was Obito still alive, and what did he have planned for the hidden leaf? For Naruto? Danzo's cane cut through the air without warning. Sasuke twisted aside. The blow missed, but the shift in pressure nearly threw him off balance. His Sharingan spun to catch the next motion, a tightening of Danzo's grip, a subtle shift of weight, the shadow of another strike. The cane halted an inch from Sasuke's ribs. You hesitate too much, said Danzo coldly. Sasuke steadied his breath and reset his stance. The ache behind his eyes settled into something familiar. Again. Danzo advanced, each step measured, each angle leaving only one correct response. Sasuke found it, barely slipping past the arc of the cane, pushing his Sharingan to keep pace. At last, Danzo stepped back. That will do for today. Sasuke released the Sharingan, though he kept his posture straight, waiting for the usual dismissal. Instead, Danzo said, Team Hyuga returned this morning? Sasuke didn't interrupt. Danzo rarely offered context, but when he did, it was deliberate. In pursuit of the Jinchuriki, they reached the eastern coastline, Danzo continued. Unfortunately, their memories end there. A slight pause. Evidently, a memory seal. Our remaining intelligence soon lost track of the Jinchuriki within the same vicinity. Sasuke sifted through the implications. The coastline there bordered the ruins of Whirlpool. The terrain there had been unstable since the village's destruction. Why was Danzo telling him all this? His connection with Naruto was tenuous, at best. As though reading his thoughts, Danzo said with a note of finality, As for you, your task remains here. Continue your training. He turned toward the door. The cane clicked softly with each step. Just before leaving, Danzo added, almost idly, Kakashi has always valued his students. There it was, the tenuous connection. When Sasuke didn't answer, Danzo didn't look back. See to it that your teacher isn't placed in a position he cannot navigate. It wasn't a threat, nor was it a warning. It hung between them like something Sasuke was meant to understand on his own. He reached the doorway, and for the briefest moment, glanced back. The look was fleeting, almost empty, but something strained at its edges. A flicker of emotion that did not belong to a man like Danzo. Resentment, maybe? Or something older. Then it was gone. Sasuke watched the cane tap down the corridor until the sound disappeared. The woven mats in the workroom beneath Karen's knees were warm from the incense in the air as Zuki guided her hand through the motions of another seal. In Whirlpool, we weave our important seals into cloth, instead of brush to paper. Zuki nodded to the fabric between them. Because to weave is to remember. After the initial confrontation, Karen had expected Zuki to immediately focus on the sealing chains. Instead, Zuki kept returning her to the loom. When she asked about it, Zuki only gave her a cryptic smile. Master the thread, and you will master the chain. While Karen wasn't entirely convinced, there was something about the quiet authority in Zuki's tone that gave Karen pause. So she didn't argue. A girl sat at a neighboring loom, her movements practiced and steady. Dark red hair bound in a neat braid, sleeves rolled to the elbows as she guided the threads. Her posture was careful, with shoulders held just a fraction too tight for someone working in a peaceful weaving hall. She hummed under her breath as she worked, soft, almost tuneless. Zuki glanced between them. Karen, this is Yua. She'll be assisting us. Yua looked up, offered a small smile, then returned to her weaving. Karen, uncertain, nodded back. The quiet of the workroom deepened as they wove, the incense thinning into ribbons in the air. The looms clicked in a steady rhythm that could have told time. Zuki adjusted one of Karen's knots with a light touch. Your tension is improving. Karen nodded, struggling to keep the next loop even as she caught glimpses of Yua's weaving, which moved with an ease she envied. The three of them sat together long enough for the late afternoon light to drift from one side of the floorboards to the other. In a lull between rows, Zuki spoke softly, without urgency. Karen, the illusions here draw from what unsettles us most. What did the island show you when you first arrived? Karen hesitated, the memory still stung. It was related to my mother. Zuki didn't push. She simply returned to her weaving. But Yua's shuttle faltered, if only for a second. My first illusion here was of my brother, she said quietly, eyes fixed on the threads. The graduation exams in the hidden mist, they don't leave much room for mercy. Something in her tone made Karen glance over. In the dim light, she noticed, for the first time, the marks along Yua's forearms, thin, pale scars that had faded with time but would never fully disappear. Karen's breath caught. I'm sorry, she offered, not sure what else she was allowed to say. Yua nodded once. It's okay. I eventually found my way here, after all. Her fingers resumed weaving, steadier now. The illusions, they test everyone. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Karen blinked, startled by the unexpected gentleness. Thanks, she muttered. Yua's smile returned, small but genuine. If you ever want company during the evening weaving hours, I'm usually here. It's easier to learn when you're not alone. Then she went back to her loom as though the moment required nothing more. Suddenly, amidst the tapestries thick with fragrance, Karen felt a pang, deep and slow, for all that had been lost over the years. This land wasn't her home, she knew that. And the most important thing to Karen was to help Naruto. But now, she hoped that in doing so, she could help this place too. Life in Whirlpool had settled into a rhythm. Naruto would wake each morning to the smell of stew simmering in the hearth. While his shadow clone in the corner disappeared with a yawn into smoke as always, nothing to report, Karen, already up, would greet him with a bowl in hand. During this morning, whatever Naruto lacked in conversation, Karen made up for it twice over. She spoke a little too much, Naruto thought, though surprisingly, he found that he didn't mind it. She chattered about the seals she was learning, another girl she'd met while weaving. She asked Naruto questions he succinctly answered, rambled when he stayed quiet, and filled the room with her voice. Afterward, Naruto would walk along the winding path to the training grounds until he found a still place to sit. He would close his eyes and breathe, focusing on the pulse of his chakra. He didn't speak of his failed attempt at controlling the Nine Tails, and neither did Ashina. However, the consequences lingered. Perhaps as an unintended boon, the new seal worked more efficiently. The chakra that leaked out ebbed and flowed with his breath, not against it. His own chakra responded more easily now, and as a result, even Sage Mode came easier. His hair didn't grow longer, nor did his fingers turn into claws. Instead, red markings appeared like flames around his eyes. The first time Naruto managed, Amakuro gave him a rare compliment. "I suppose you're not as slow as I thought," he said, snout turned up. Ashina, meanwhile, offered neither praise nor rebuke. Instead, he turned to history. Before the Nine Tails, Ashina began as they stood before a mural in the temple's innermost chamber. There was only one beast Jubi, the Ten Tails. It was the progenitor of all chakra, a monstrous fusion of nature's raw fury and divine force. Its power was so immense that it warped the very landscape and drove men to the madness of war. As Naruto listened, he raised his hand to the ancient carvings in the stone. It was cold and worn just beyond the mold of his fingers, suggesting to the many others that had stood in this exact position before and done the same. The man who would come to be known as the Sage of Six Paths, Ashina continued, was the first to stand against it. He sealed the chakra from the Ten Tails into himself, and sealed away its husk to form the moon. With this power, he granted humanity ninjutsu and guided them toward peace. But nearing death, the sage feared the beast's resurgence. Thus, to protect the world from its rampages, he divided the Ten Tails chakra into 9 separate entities, the tailed beasts. Naruto stopped. Then, the Nine Tails itself is another piece of the whole? That's right. Naruto's gaze drew back to the mural, eyes fixated upon the carved depiction of the Ten Tails. A single beast, a weapon separated into 9 parts. The implications slid into place, each detail forming a more terrifying picture. The deceased Leaf agent at the safe house, where he had escorted Hinata. She'd used her Byakugan to decipher it in the pit of his stomach. Akatsuki is making a weapon to control the world. The Leaf's Jinchuriki is their last target. At the time, it had been too ambiguous, too obvious to draw any concrete conclusions. But now, he felt the shape of something larger and sinister taking form. He thought of the other Jinchuriki, Fu, Gaara. Not to mention, the others have already been claimed by the Akatsuki. If they were gathering all the tailed beasts. Naruto swallowed hard. They're trying to put it back together. Ashina's gaze slid toward him, unreadable and solemn. The Ten Tails. Akatsuki is trying to bring it back to life. Ashina's gaze immediately hardened, a long-held suspicion confirmed at last. Even now, as we speak, they are hunting down Jinchuriki to extract their beasts. While our operatives have been unable to secure the location, their activities suggest that they are already in possession of the Ten Tails husk. Naruto thought back to what little he knew of the violent organization. Akatsuki, why go this far? Why now? Ashina's lips thinned. I don't claim to know all of Akatsuki's intentions. But I know this much: for years, they were shaped in secret by a man named Shimura Danzo. Naruto stiffened in surprise. It was a name he had not expected to hear outside of the Hidden Leaf. Danzo? He's behind Akatsuki? Just how far back did the new Hokage's machinations go? Indirectly, yes, Ashina replied. His tone remained even, but there was a faint edge to it. Years ago, when the Hidden Whirlpool was invaded, it was Danzo who orchestrated the attack. His root operatives worked from the shadows, destabilizing alliances and inciting conflict. Akatsuki grew out of the very chaos he cultivated. The revelation landed with cold precision. Ashina's voice did not rise, yet Naruto felt the undercurrent of an old bitterness simmering beneath the composed veneer. I believe Danzo's ultimate ambition is to dominate over the other villages, Ashina continued. But his method set off a chain reaction he never fully controlled, and now, his creation has grown beyond him. Ashina scoffed. We have endured the consequences of that man far longer than anyone knows. Naruto absorbed the words without speaking. The chamber felt smaller somehow, the carved figures on the wall witnessed to the subtle changes in the older man's expression, a tightening at the corner of his mouth, a faint crease between his brows. For the first time since arriving in Whirlpool, Naruto felt like he was finally starting to understand the tension lurking beneath the still waters. Ashina hated Danzo not in the distant way one hated potential enemies, but from a place that was much more personal. And if Ashina believed a second attack from Danzo was inevitable, that a barrier supported by only half of the Ninetales would not be able to withstand an invasion. Naruto lowered his gaze to the mural again, following the carved lines of the Tentails with his eyes. In the years since he had left his village, Rashi had walked across the land and experienced many things. People came and went. Villages came and went. With the passing of the years, many men his age had long since put down their blades. And yet the heat within him his own, and the beasts kept him on the move. The Four Tails had been restless for days, prowling along the inside of his chakra like a caged animal. Cocoa taken, the beast grumbled, simmering with rage. They will come for us next. Rashi ignored the tone, though the words dug deeper than he let on. Their contact in the hidden stone had passed on the troubling news that the Five Tails, Cocoa, and its Jinchuriki, Han, had vanished. Anoki had sent a summons for Rashi to return finally to the village. He'd refused. Now, he was starting to wonder whether he'd been just a little too hard-headed. Tonight, the quiet that had settled over the forest felt odd. Normally, the borderlands carried wind, birds, and the shifting of branches. But now, there was nothing but the faint sting of salt. The coastline couldn't be far. It made Rashi think, for the first time in a very long time, of his family. They had come as refugees to the hidden stone from another land, and yet much of the heat that ran in his blood was a testament to their lineage. Even now in his advanced age, his hair burned as red as the sunset. Just as he'd stepped over the gnarled roots of a fallen cedar, he felt a shift in the air, and knew his instincts hadn't been wrong. The first sign was the sound, water rushing where no river should be. Rashi turned, molten chakra surging to the surface. A column of water snapped upward, slamming toward him. He countered with a burst of lava chakra, the two colliding with a hiss. Steam exploded outward, nearly blinding him, but he didn't wait for it to clear. He darted sideways, drawing heat from his core until the earth beneath his sandals glowed red. Something moved inside the haze quick, almost playful. To your left, the Four Tails snapped. Rashi pivoted, launching molten rock in a wide arc that hissed into obsidian shards. A voice answered him from behind, amused and young. Whoa, old man. That lava of yours is crazy. The mist thinned to reveal a pale-haired youth, lips tugged back into a grin that exposed a row of sharp, shark-like teeth. He twirled a kunai between fingers that blurred into liquid. Rashi's jaw tightened. Who sent you? Does it matter? The youth vanished in a surge of movement. Spears of water slammed toward Rashi, to which he answered with heat, splitting the attacks apart. The youth slipped effortlessly out of his reach with an infuriating laugh. Man, that's hot, he called. You're giving me a workout. Rashi's patience thinned. Lava erupted upward in a violent wave, hitting the youth squarely only for his torso to ripple apart harmlessly, reforming a heartbeat later. Slippery little bastard, the Four Tails growled his exact sentiments. Rashi drew deeper, heat rippling outward. The forest lit in red and gold sudden, fierce. The youth's smirk wavered. Okay, that's okay. The ground beneath him ruptured, fiery magma surging high enough to swallow him whole. The air in the clearing instantly grew parched, sizzling from the sheer heat. The youth's outline wavered, liquid body destabilizing. Rashi raised a hand to finish him. And then, with a gust of wind, the pressure in the clearing shifted. Amidst the black smog, wings flashed a bird, inexplicably alive within the hellfire. A girl soon followed, raising a hand to allow the bird a perch. Her appearance was unusual, with bright orange hair and black rods running down her face. Most unusual of all, however, were her eyes, rings upon rings of lavender and gray. Rashi's breath stilled. He didn't know her name, but every instinct he had screamed danger. The youth coughed back into shape behind her, grinning like he'd been granted reprieve. Thanks. The girl's unnatural gaze settled on Rashi. Jinchuriki of the Four Tails, she said, the youthfulness of her voice at odds with the utter coldness of her tone. You have wandered long enough. Rashi braced himself, heat gathering at his core. So Akatsuki sends children after their targets now. If necessary, the girl replied, and then clapped her hands together. Kuchios no Jutsu, summoning technique. A monstrous eagle dove out of the smoke, its eyes marked with concentric rings. He answered with a sweep of blazing rock, shearing the creature in half only for its halves to twist and multiply, two bodies reforming where one had fallen. TCH. He drew back as the pair lunged again, beaks wide. Rashi slammed a palm to the ground. Lava surged upward, swallowing one eagle whole. It melted with a screech, but the second tore through the wall of heat unchecked, forcing him backward. The pale-haired youth, still half-wavering, half-reformed, leapt into the fray again, a spiral of water carving through the steam. Rashi twisted aside, but the pause cost him, as the eagle struck. With a snarl, he met it head-on, grabbing its beaks and pouring searing magma through its skull. As it burst apart, he turned to fire a blast of lava where the girl stood. But she was already gone, sidestepping lightly as another summoning circle opened behind her. A gigantic bird, grotesque and armored, swooped down in a razor arc. Rashi ducked under it, returning fire upward in a wave of white-hot magma. He staggered forward and the girl was suddenly in front of him. She swung once, and he barely blocked in time. Even then, he couldn't help but think that for someone so small, her strength was unnatural. "You will come with us," she said. Rashi staggered but didn't fall. Heat spiraled through his limbs, wild, instinctive. "Enough," the Four-Tails howled. "Let me out! I'll burn them where they stand." Rashi grit his teeth, vision splitting into red. Lava crawled up his arms as his spine arched, bones creaking under the rising chakra. The trunks nearest him blistered, swaying under the heat. He took one step forward. Black metal flashed. A rod punched through the back of his shoulder, severing chakra pathways so cleanly that the breath died in his throat. Another struck his lower back. A third slid between his ribs. The Four-Tails roared in fury, but the sound came muffled now, strangled beneath foreign chakra pouring through the rods. "Stay conscious, fool, don't let them take us." The girl stepped nearer, black receivers glinting faintly. "Resisting will only prolong the pain." Rashi tried to lift an arm. It didn't answer. He forced heat up through his spine anyway, a last attempt, and something slammed into him from the side, a blunt mass of water pressure that hurled him clean through a half-melted tree. He skidded across scorched earth, ash rising in a plume. When his vision cleared, the youth was already standing over him, reforming with a sharp grin. "Should have stayed down the first time," he said, cracking his knuckles. "Old guys always make it harder than it needs to be." Rashi tried to rise, but his limbs were unresponsive, his chakra splintered by the rods. Suigetsu crouched beside him, pressing a liquid palm to his chest. A dense whirlpool of water pressure gathered. "You hit hard," he admitted. "Respect. But this part's gonna suck." Rashi's vision pulsed. "Rashi!" the Four-Tails called, voice fraying into static. The final blow landed silent and absolute. The heat inside Rashi buckled. His legs gave way. The ground rushed up to meet him. Iron tasted in his mouth, and he knew this was the end. There was no fear. No bitterness. Only a faint, stubborn dismay, not at losing, but at one final truth. To the very end, he had never once spoken its true name. Sunji. The shoreline was quiet again. The Jinchuriki lay bound in the center of the clearing, chains hammered deep into the stone. His breath was shallow but steady. His red hair bright even beneath the ash called to mind another Jinchuriki from a different village altogether. It was not yet his time, though it rapidly approached. The mist had thinned, the moon hung high over the water, bright enough to wash the rocks in silver. He stood a short distance away, watching the tide ebb and flow. The mask hid most of his face, but the Sharingan gleamed faintly beneath it. It slowly took in the horizon, at the invisible lines of a barrier he knew existed somewhere among the eddies. A barrier that separated a long-lost village from the rest of the world. Suigetsu sauntered closer, glancing down at the unconscious body with a low whistle. "Guy's tougher than he looks," he said. I thought he'd melt for good that last time. Toby didn't answer at first. The space around him shimmered, as if even the night air had learned not to settle too close. He placed a hand against the bound body, sending out a thin pulse of chakra that returned to him layered with faint echoes. The blood of the Uzumaki runs strong, he said at last. Soijetsu stretched his arms over his head. Well, glad he's not my problem anymore. A soft step sounded behind them. The girl with the ringed eyes emerged from the shadows, a bird perched silently on her shoulder. She regarded Rashi's body with blank indifference, the black receivers lining her forearms catching the moonlight. She was silent, as was usual for a path of pain. The remaining presences arrived with far less subtlety. A hulking, stitched figure detached himself from the treeline, surveying the scene with a dismissive sound. A metallic skitter followed him, and a puppet body emerged moving with smooth, lifeless precision. Moonlight reflected off lacquered wood and concealed joints. And lastly, a boy with delicate features stepped into the clearing, quiet and composed. Unlike the others, when his gaze found the bound Jinchuriki, something that might have been pity flickered there then smoothed away. With the 5 of them gathered, the shoreline seemed suddenly too small. Only the tide moved now, faint and unbothered, swelling and receding against the rocks. Toby approached the Jinchuriki without hurry. Even caked in ash, the red hair burned in the moonlight. Beneath the layers of suppression, he could sense the beast inside thrashing not enough to break free, but enough for the unconscious body to tremble faintly. He knelt and drew a blade across the Jinchuriki's forearm. Dark blood slid along the metal, thick and slow. As though in response, the tide pulled back again, leaving only the faintest of imprints on the sand. The key to entering Whirlpool lies in their lineage, Toby said quietly, and though their true descendants have scattered to the 4 corners. His blade hovered over the sealwork. You will do it. With a flick, droplets of blood scattered across the spiraling pattern. Toby lifted his gaze. The moon hung so directly above him it felt deliberate, like an eye that gazed accusingly at his many sins. He activated the Sharingan, and the lines of the seal glowed in answer. Behind him, the assembled members of Akatsuki watched without a word. Let's begin. Thanks for watching. I hope you had as much fun as I did putting this epic what if together. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a single twist in the story. Drop your thoughts, theories, or even wild ideas in the comments. I read every single one. And hey, if you're craving more awesome Naruto content, go check out the other videos on the channel. I've got plenty of heat waiting for you. Until next time, stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember, even a shadow clone needs love. Peace out.